Hello. Hi. I'm Matthew Varrette. I'm a therapist in Ontario, Canada. Hello. Should I talk more about anything I do, or just some dude talking with Crymson, Yeah, so I work full time at a hospital doing intensive treatment for different types of anxieties and depression under a cognitive behavioral model. And then I also run a private practice where I see clients via Zoom. And I do a bunch of board work. I do a bunch of strategic planning work. I do a bunch of geeky evaluations of programs and stuff like that. Yeah, and I like horror a lot. Yeah, absolutely. So yes. Whew, where to begin? Well, I mean, and I'm sure I'm thinking of every single word I'm going to say right now, because I'm sure there's people out there who are like, that's not exactly true, or that's not exactly what the textbook says. But yes, yeah. So, and then, so the idea for cognitive behavioral therapy is you have cognition, which is thoughts and emotions. And then you have the behavioral aspect, which is what you do, the behaviors, and then also the physical feedback from your body, like the body sensation pieces. And so putting them together, there's a cognitive behavioral model where essentially, depending on which model you use or what view you take, the newest one I'm taking is that most people, because they're caught in different loops, they will notice their physical reactions first: sweaty palms, heart racing, sweating, stuff like that. And then they'll notice their emotional reaction: dread, anxiety, panic, guilt, shame. And then boom, the thoughts come up. What am I thinking about right now? What am I doing right now? Oh, I have a test tomorrow and I'm the worst at tests and everything's terrible. And then the behavior that feeds back into the loop that makes it worse. Well, I'm going to go play some video games or something else instead. And that bad behavior feeds into the loop and says, yep, you should have been activated. Tests are the worst. Go do something else. You'll probably fail it anyways. And then you torture yourself while you go play video games. So that, in essence, is a little example of the cognitive behavioral model in focus. But again, it focuses in on your thoughts, behaviors, connections, and then also the connections between all of it: thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and your physical feedback. You're like, am I doing that right now? And that is why you cry during Encanto, the end. Yeah, I mean, there's more nuances and there's more subtleties and there's different flavors for things, but I think in essence that's that idea between, your thoughts can affect your behaviors as much as your behaviors can affect your thoughts. And it's one of many different types of therapy that's out there, sort of thing. So yeah. And some therapies come out of frustration with other therapies too. So that's why you got like first wave, second wave, third wave, all those generational stuff as well, sort of thing. So I think what's interesting is when matching up to a therapist, the idea is to just do that intake and meet with people and hear from them what they have to offer and where they think they can kind of provide support and help. And there's I'll get it out of the way to start with. I think there's a big difference between counseling and treatment. So often if you call a crisis line, and you're having a panic attack, they're very, very well trained in kind of, bringing you down. So they'll say, put a blanket on, close your eyes, go into a dark room, curl into a ball and just ride it out, sort of thing, right? And that's more coping with panic attacks than anything else. When it comes down to therapy, a big part of cognitive behavioral therapy is exposures. So the idea is most treatment runs along assessment, psychoeducation on what's going on, cognitive restructuring, challenging those thoughts in the moment, why things are maybe better than you feel they are, and then exposures. So exposures are you take all that learning stuff and then you go and do the thing that you fear the most. So if I was doing exposures for panic attacks and someone was having a panic attack, the difference would be, I want you to go do jumping jacks to prove you're not going to die. Now, of course, we clear this with your doctor, of course. The idea is, oh, you feel like you're going to die and there's dread. Well, why don't we do some jumping jacks to prove that you're going to live? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that because, what I really, really love about doing cognitive behavioral therapy is it's very clear from this first session where we're going to go. So if you tell me standing in a busy Walmart on Christmas Eve with people running by and rushing and sound and noise really cause a lot of anxiety, we're going to do that eventually. Right? And I think as a but that's so good because it's that idea of, we can both cognitively probably right now, hopefully, agree that that won't kill you, and that's probably doesn't need the level of activation that we're doing. But it's very hard to do, and there's a just in case attitude, and kind of talking back to your horror piece. That's why I love horror movies and stuff like that, is from a therapeutic kind of view. It's the idea that, like, a lot of people would say generalized anxiety and worry. So the core of generalized anxiety and worry from the cognitive behavioral background is fear of the unknown. So uncertainty causes this big activation. As something that's novel or ambiguous or unpredictable, I better activate because it's going to be the worst and I can't handle it. But what's interesting though is that, I'll tell people like, oh, let's go watch a horror movie then. And they're like, nope. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to be worried it's going to happen. And I'm like, do you really think the killer is like waiting for you to watch the movie? And then like when you're done, he taps on the window and he's like, did you see that? That's tonight. Okay, that's tonight. I've been waiting so long for you to watch this. It's going to happen tonight. But it's that fear that, well, if I didn't think about it and now I do, I'm going to worry about it happening. I'm going to, maybe it's more likely to happen. And it's like, it was just as likely to happen whether you watched it or not. At least you know what to do now, or what not to do, I guess. The rules of horror movies. Yeah.
All
Oh,
right, now
okay.
you can hear me.
So this has been Coffee with Matthew, and Crymson has been a ghost this whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah, I'm not really here. Um, no, I love horror. I don't. Okay, so I love horror. I don't watch psychological horror, like people hurting people. Like I'm aware that that happens. Like that's
Mm.
terrifying. I'm good. Like throw some ghosts. Like God, I binge watched the first four Paranormal Activities,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and like besides jump scares, I was like, that's pretty cool. Like,
Well, it's all set in people's homes, right? And
yeah,
then captured video and stuff like that, right?
yeah.
So, but do you think, and this is not weird, by the way, for today, all opinions expressed by Matthew Varrette are not to be used of therapeutic value, and they do not reflect, et cetera, and this does not constitute a therapeutic alliance in any way. And this is not providing therapy. But do you find it's easier to kind of like have those ghost physical attacks than just like watching another person physically attack another person?
I think
Distance?
I think well, I think it relates back to the complex PTSD that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I lived through trauma. Like I didn't live through like people breaking into my house and murdering my family, but like I had a lot of my own physical violence, physical trauma, and stuff like that. So I feel that um like I'm aware that those terrible things happen, and sometimes I'm like, you know what, this looks interesting, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
um and I'll have some people watch it first and go, this might be a little triggering, and they usually look for things like PTSD related, anything doing with war. We just, my dad was a vet, we just avoid a lot of that stuff. But I'm like, I'm never impressed by
Mm-hmm.
anything. Nothing really surprises me. Like sometimes I'm like, ooh, I didn't think he was the killer. Like
Yeah.
that's about it. But like in when you get supernatural with it when it becomes something like extra. I'm just like, oh shit, I never thought, like, me and Thea the Bard, who's in chat right now, watched the Asylum of Gojim, I think. Okay. Korean horror movie. Her and I are real good. We've been watching horror for, as long as we've been friends. Mm-hmm. Our mutual friend, Kink Nightmare, came into the Discord while we were watching this movie and screenshotted the looks on our faces as, like, I'm like...
just a peeking part.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to see this. Because it was really good. Like, Korean horror is, like, it's a whole different... It's its own animal. Yeah. It's so different. I don't get like that with people. I'm like... Like, with the exception being, like slasher flicks. But, again, like... Yeah. Jason and Freddy and Michael, like, they're obviously some entity of some sort. Like, they've been killed a million ways. So, it like, it's impressed. I'll actually get scared, stuff like that. That's what I dig. I'm like, people can hurt people. Like, I can turn on the news and watch that.
Yeah.
I can't turn on the news and be like, Ghost drops somebody off of a 40-story building, and I'm like, I'd like to see that. How? That's impressive.
Yeah, and I want to differentiate the like movies that are really more gore orientated, or like more torture porn,
like
or more
Hostel and Saw and
like, I mean, Saw I love Saw, and I love Saw for the traps. I love Saw for the BS morality stuff that's put into it. Later Saw parts where it's like stab yourself in the neck and try not to die. That's the trap. It's like, oh, okay, all right. Or like when people get into traps and they just like flail around and they don't like think through it.
In the second one, the needle pit. Oh.
Well, the girl put her hands in.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
For 2000 whatever. Halloween 2000 whatever. But like she puts her arms in. She's like, oh, this really hurts. There's a lot of blood.
No,
like,
not that
not
one.
Trying. I know, but that's what I didn't like.
Okay. Oh yeah. No, there's one where the girl fell into the pit, and like I have my 4 tattoos. I think I'd be over needles. I'm not. Mm-hmm. I can get injections and IVs and all that. That's fine. But that scene like I want to like peel my skin off. Like I don't want to feel anything. Touch it and look at it. No, like that was it for me. I'm good. But yeah, no, I love horror. I love it. I love it too. Mm-hmm. Wait, Hellraiser is my favorite.
I saw the Hellraiser piece. Yeah, absolutely.
Hellraiser is my favorite. I don't know why. And I don't want to ever analyze it. I just want that to be a thing.
I don't want to learn why.
I don't. There's something. I think it's okay to not learn about something. It's okay to.
There's a basement in my mind and it has a lock on it.
Yeah.
And I would prefer it to be kept shut. Yeah.
Whether it be for therapy, like I don't want to talk about this because of trauma, or like I don't want to know if I've related this to trauma, and we'll just leave it. And I love my therapist. She's like, that's fine. We won't talk about it.
Yeah.
I have also recently learned that you can say things like, "Can you not note this in my chart?" Which I didn't know people could say. Mm-hmm. And she was like, "Yeah, people ask that all the time." I'm like, "Wonderful," and then I will tell her something.
Yeah.
And that remains as confidential as it is ever going to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's complex because I think, again, one of the problems that I have working with Bodhana and such is, as a therapist, is that there's different stuff here in Canada than there is in the States often. So, but I do have to, if I'm going to practice outside of my province or outside of my country, I have to adhere to the standards of wherever I'm delivering the therapy. Okay. But, it's a tricky piece that you bring that up. I find it interesting because, so when someone asks me, could you keep this off the chart? That is like a gold mine of like, why? Like what's purpose? Like, and you don't have to tell me all what it is, but just as an example, it's like, or like, please don't, if I'm seeing somebody who their parents are paying for the sessions or whatever, please don't tell my parents. It's this idea of like, this is a great place to stop and sit. So what is the worst thought that's going to come out of you saying this? And then I have to write it down. What are you worried is going to happen? And then, of course, there's always this little red flag that comes up where it's like, are you going to tell me something I have to act on? And so, like it's that idea of, I worked in mental health crisis for 8 years as a team lead, and, nothing surprises me these days. But it's the idea of, worrying maybe the person will overreact and press their, every therapist has a red button they press and the police bust down the door. Yeah. But it's that idea of, this is interesting the way you phrase this, and the way you're talking about whatever you're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Interesting, because again, right, like it's almost a hostage taking sometimes for therapists, because you're like, well, I won't tell you if you won't promise, and it's like, I can't promise until you tell me.
Yeah.
And then and then we usually, like 9 times out of 10 I find it's a buildup of like, oh, okay, well, like, I can just write that in more general terms or whatever.
That's basically what happened. It was like a deep dark secret, and I told her, and she was like, yeah, I'm not really surprised or shocked. And I was like, yeah. Like, I don't know if I'm relieved or upset. I didn't know how to feel about it. But it was nice. It was, especially since I started seeing a new medication doctor. I was like, I don't need him seeing this shit, like, right up. Like, I haven't met him yet. Like, I don't need him.
Yeah. Well, and actually, can I ask a question about that? You can tell me if you're comfortable or not. Yeah. So what's the feedback between your therapist and the doctor? Just curious, like, do they send each other reports regularly, or is there like a database they share or something?
I think so they're obviously the same place, location, whatever.
Okay, cool.
So they're in the same company. I hate saying company, but I guess so, company.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like her notes get uploaded, or she types them out.
Okay, so she's part of the same agency. Like, I'm part of a hospital, so my notes would be seen by other professionals.
Yeah.
But then we've also argued against for locking our notes too. That's another thing. But if I was in private practice seeing somebody, if you're like, never send anything to my family doctor, I'd discuss the value of maybe not, or I prefer to write summary letters for things.
Yeah.
If you want something in particular. But that's interesting. So yeah, if they're part of the same agency or part of the same group, then yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so everything goes, back and forth. I'm not too fond of my new meds doctor, but like I most of them are just weird. So weird. And like
a psychiatrist or like just a physician?
Psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So weird. My favorite. I had a psychiatric nurse, and I loved her. She was very personal and very wonderful. All the psychiatrists I've talked to, however, just weird, just so weird, and like I can't even explain it. Like, some of them are weird to the, like, you have a well in your basement that I should be concerned about, kind of, don't you? Like,
how much time do you get with them?
Well, typically the first time I meet them, I get an hour, and then it's 15-minute follow-ups. But this new one, we just did a 15-minute for like our first session, and I was like, okay. He's like, we're gonna do this, and then you're gonna come back in a month, and I was like, all right. Cool.
Well, and here's the thought about that comes to my mind is, wow, they must be really good to do things in 15 minutes.
Yeah. But he's my 4th in a year.
Yeah.
So, and the practice just lost 2 people who could prescribe. So I'm sure he's dealing with a lot of intake. But I also find like the men are humorless. I'm just like, could you just laugh just like a little bit? Could you just...
We're only 20 years or 30 years out from when the good old days, apparently, when a psychiatrist or any physician walks in the room, everybody stands up. So that's when you talk about certain age groups and certain types of professions for physicians and such, we're only 20, 30 years past that point where literally everyone had to stand up when they walked in the room.
It's weird how far advanced we are, how much further we have to go. But at the same time, we haven't been doing it for that long. Like, modern psychology is still relatively new. Yeah. And the book, the Psychiatric Bible,
DSM.
Yeah. Is still adding things constantly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an interesting thing to mention about therapists, because I think is today's topic talking to a therapist or how to seek out a therapist or
All
just
of it.
therapist.
Just therapists in
Is
general.
Yeah, if you're seeking I mean, one, the first thing I would say is notice people's credentials and ask them what they do. Because some people provide counseling, some people provide support, some people provide therapy, some people provide everything in between. And for here in Ontario and Canada, it's a little more clear. Like you can use the term psychotherapist, like I can if you belong to a certain college or you have certain trainings, and it's a protected title. And then everything else, therapist, counselor, support, whatever, is all unprotected. So you can call yourself whatever you like. And so it's very interesting because, it must be really, really difficult for people to seek help. And you have 5 emails back from 5 different people, all claiming that they can help you with your issue. And having to sort out what a background resume looks like versus what they say versus how they work versus how anything goes is so difficult, because you have people who make you feel better, and then there are people who force you into a Walmart on Christmas Eve. So there's a lot of stuff that like really can get mucky. And I think, I know the feedback informed treatment has been a big part of what we do over at the hospital, but I think they were bringing up research that said something like 70% of people who visit a therapist and do anything with any background with any therapist feel better 6 months out.
Yeah.
So, okay. So where are we going and what are we doing, right?
Well, it's also interesting so my therapy situation is awkward. I started therapy when I was 15-ish, in that area. And I went through a bunch of therapists. Since I was a minor, I was, forced to continue to see therapists I didn't like. I was put on medication that didn't work. And it's hell for a minor in a situation like that, because you don't have, control over what's going on. Now as an adult, I started going to therapy about 5 years ago. The first therapist I had, was absolutely wonderful. She was a wonderful therapist. She and almost every therapist I talked to was like, yeah, I got into therapy to help kids. So she's definitely one of those. She had kids come in. She, had markers and stuff. She'd ask me to draw things and stuff like that. So she was great for the first part of my therapy. So that was making me feel comfortable, assessing my situation. And I saw her for over a year, and then she could no longer practice. So she recommended my current therapist. My current therapist is a lot different, because it's almost like a change in parenting. It went from very much like, that's okay, everything's going to be fine, we're going to work on this, to I don't give a shit if you don't want to talk about it. That's what we're going to do. And you pay me to do this. And yeah. So there's a huge change, but it was a necessary change. I got comfortable with it. I knew this is what I wanted to do. I knew that I needed the help. I needed to go from there. And then I went to a therapist who was like, yeah, I don't, I love you and I care for you and everything like that. But this is how it's going to go. We're going to talk about the thing. And yeah. And then of course I've been seeing her long enough. She's like, no, back up. We're going to talk about that statement you just made. And I'm like, we have to.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful. It's a very good relationship that I have with her. But everybody needs somebody different.
And you're paying for someone privately, right? And that's such an interesting dynamic compared to free services. I'm from Canada.
We don't have free services.
Exactly, yeah. And so
that's
it's
adorable.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's such an interesting thing from private practice, because here you are, someone is paying you, you get to know them, and you actually start to get to know as well what their resources are like. Mm-hmm. And so often what I'll do with people is I'll ask, how are you covering this? What are you willing to cover? This is kind of the treatment plan of how many sessions I think it'll take to kind of work through this, because I believe therapy can be a lifelong journey. It's really, but it's not lifelong together forever.
Yeah.
Like, let's do 15 sessions, 8 sessions on blank, go digest, come back to me or someone else, do 15 sessions on blank. Then I think, look at this different type of therapy with this type of person, do 10 to 15 on that blank. Like it's taking courses almost sometimes, especially for treatment.
Yeah.
As opposed to more like coping skills and stuff like that. But I think, I meet people who are like, yeah, I've been with my therapist for 10 years and I'm seeking out a new one because they retired. And I'm like, why don't you have 2 PhDs by that point? Like 10 years weekly? It's like, we're going to do like when I do my intensive program through the hospital, it's 8 to 15 sessions for moderate to mild. And, we treat things like obsessive compulsive issues or post-traumatic stress and such. So, these are doable pieces. And most of the time, I think, the only times that clients don't finish is when they, and I'm getting better at having conversations throughout, but they stop doing homework, they stop doing readings, and then we get to exposures and they're like, I'm not doing this. And it's like, yeah, I know. Like, I've seen you fall off a bit and we've had a discussion. Should we continue or not? This is the way I'm kind of going. This is the way I've been trained in. This is what I think is kind of the way that we should do it. It's been, clinically validated, but this might not be the right time for you, sort of thing. But when people get from start to end, they see that miraculous change and they go, oh, wow, yeah, okay. Like, and if we're talking 8 to 15 sessions, it's like, again, I think best practices for trauma, for example, or very big trauma is 2-3 years.
Yeah.
But when someone's in it for like 10, 15, 20 straight.
Hi, Harley.
He smells therapy.
Yeah, I wonder if people get comfortable, and that's what it is. Like they and I think that we as a society have a huge problem with complaining.
Yeah.
So that, like, and obviously I don't know, but I wonder if that's where it gets into, like, we get complacent, we complain, and then that becomes our week to week. We stop working on things and we just.
Yeah, I call that coffee chat.
Yeah.
I call that, like, when you go to a session and the person's like, what happened this week? What's going on? And then you talk about what happened that week and then the session's over, sort of thing. I think I call that kind of coffee chat stuff because, I mean, I don't know. And I think when you're getting paid privately and it's your bread and butter, maybe you do want to keep on people for a little bit longer. And the other thing that comes to my mind is I know psychologists who will, like, help support someone put in their lawsuit against the church and then get money to continue therapy for a very long time. And then they start to attend like funerals or birthdays of the client, and then it just gets mixy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, there is an aspect of, what I've done personally for myself is tried really, really hard to, this is what I provide. This is the amount of sessions I think it'll take. We can go forward or not, because I feel unethical in taking money and not progressing forward. And I'll fully be the first to admit, let's contract for a couple sessions, and then after that, it's like, yeah, this isn't going anywhere. You probably need a tertiary level of care, maybe a go-away program, a psychologist who, like, PhD level, who that's their bread and butter, and they've written 1 million papers on it.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Or if it's just a clash between personalities, some people need someone more nurturing than I, because I am very much goal orientated, and I'm working on it, but it's slowing down sometimes and just being like, oh, I see, they're there, I understand.
Okay, like, so I want to put the face that I'm making is there for a reason. When I met Matt, I met Matt as my therapist for TTRPG. He was the DM therapist for it. And we worked on things. And the nice I love your smile. You're like, yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And I walked out, and this is one of the reasons I came to work with Bodhana, is because I walked out with so much. And I want people to know, like, hey, this really helped, this really worked. This is something I would, if you're into TTRPG, even if you're not, give it a shot. But Matt has also given me nightmares. So.
It's true.
But yeah, so working on things is wonderful. But yeah, it was hard.
Well, I'll tell you something too, which is interesting. So I was listening to a podcast from the Ontario Institute of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. It's called Thoughts on Record, and they had on sleep experts, and they were talking about how these two researchers, like their lifelong research is on sleep and such, and how they explain dreams were your mind has a diorama at night. And it puts you as a character and then something else to elicit a reaction. And then it goes, go, here's the scenario, here's you, here's something, and go. And your brain is trying to figure out, one of the aspects of sleep is your brain's trying to figure out if something had meaning that day or not. Like, what should you focus on? What should you keep in your memory a little harder than others? And so if you elicit any reaction, it's like, yes, that is important somehow. I'm not quite sure yet, but it is important. So when you say nightmares, it's like, yep, that's your mind going, oh, let's put in you and what you did in TTRPG and go. And oh, you're okay. Well, this is important.
Yeah, well, I don't need Slender Man showing up in my dreams. Thank you very much.
I'm absolving myself of all negligence, I think is what I'm trying to say.
That is exactly what he was trying to say. Yeah, it was wonderful. You were a master storyteller. Everything was beautifully done.
Oh, thank you.
And as I said, like I tell people all the time, I walked out not knowing I had been therapized. Professional word there. And I walked out with self-confidence. I walked out with, and you and I had talked about it because we're friends now. We had talked about how I like walked out knowing, and this is one of the most important things I have ever learned, knowing that strangers don't give two shits about me. Yep. Was my favorite thing.
The topic we were working on in the group was social anxiety. So yes, it's a challenge. The flavor for cognitive behavioral therapy for social anxiety is almost a phobic response to negative critiques from others. And there's usually that aspect, and then there's another aspect of either reviewing in the moment or reviewing later every single thing you did socially. Did I make enough eye contact? Did I move my hands enough? Did I blink too much?
Did I say the wrong thing?
And people, did I say the wrong thing? So you have like two flavors. I mean, there's more than two flavors. I mean, one of the biggest flavors is either someone who's super social and then later goes home and they write down in their notepad everything they said and analyze, or people who just avoid social interaction altogether. But it's interesting because with the TTRPG thing, the hope was to run a social anxiety group and then run it under TTRPG. So the equivalent of running a social anxiety group with 6 people, but instead what we're going to do as a group activity is we're going to do the TTRPG. So, half hour before check-in and a little bit afterwards for checkout, and please explore what you like. And if I would say one of the big things that contributes to why it feels so it flows so well and natural is because there is the therapist aspect, but also people will bring to the table what they want to work on.
Yes.
And I think that's huge. Like, you don't have to constantly be thinking of things for your characters to express. You can also spend a lot of your time waiting for them to bring in things they want to sort through, and then they will sort through it.
Yeah.
And just facilitate that.
It's so before we had the group, therapized is a word. All right, cool. Good to know. Before the group, I had my head half shaved, pink hair, and I'm at the playground with my daughter, and in the back of my brain I'm going all of these other parents are staring at you oh my god, is that the mom? And that's how my whole thought process would be. Or did I say the right thing? Was this the right tone? And I would spend so much time just agonizing over those things. And now I don't give a shit. Which is literally what comes out. I just stopped caring.
But even the detail you used now, right? So you had pink hair and half of it was shaved. This is what I always love sorting this stuff out, right? Because a lot of people will get these big tattoos of scary stuff, and or they'll have colored hair, or they'll have a certain hair pattern, like a haircut. I think that's what officially a hair pattern is. And then they'll be like, I don't want to draw attention to myself though, to get judged, but also I want to look like one of those really colorful frogs that are poisonous, and don't touch me and don't look at me, but also stand out. And it's always an interesting contrast, right? Because don't look at me and don't judge me, but I also have pink hair, which will naturally draw the eye, right? So
Okay, I had pink hair because pink is not my color. I had pink hair because we had done a charity thing, and that was the color they chose. So
yeah. No, but I mean, like, just
Yeah.
in general, right? Like tattoos. I know there's lots of studies on tattoos, for example, especially facial tattoos, where it's like tattoos as a warning, like leave me alone, I'm tough, but also like it draws the eye. So there's this contrast of like look and then move on.
Yeah,
Sort of
I have a large tattoo on my back of a half naked woman, half naked demon. It's my Lilith tattoo. Her boobs are out, and sometimes I worry. I've gone to conventions where I've asked the front, like, hey, if my tattoo's showing, like, can you just draw a bra on my chick for a minute, like, with a Sharpie, please? But it shouldn't matter. If you're whoever is learning about boobs from my back, that's your problem, not mine. For my tattoo. So it's I think that a lot of it is because we're raised with the like I'm 40, so is the like, don't, make sure you're quiet and make sure you're out of everybody's way if you're a kid and you're not doing too much. So I think like as we grow older, like we want to express ourselves. So yeah, we're gonna dye our hair and pierce things and tattoos and all that stuff. But then there's that immediate anxiety of, oh God, I've made myself too big in this space, and now I'm taking up space, and now people are looking at me. But your analogy, the last time we talked, your analogy of like, when was the last time, like, who's the last person you remember tripping in public? Do you remember the last time somebody tripped in front of you? No. Nobody remembers that you tripped today. Nobody's thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's good to have in the back of your head. Like, oh, I tripped, oh well, everybody does, it happens, I have pink hair. If somebody has a thought about it, oh well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it's really again, right? Like, I kind of go more these days anyways. I mean, everyone picks up a flavor of the type of therapy they're into at the moment, but mine's more of the unified transdiagnostic approach. And what that means is it's trying to find something that explains a whole bunch of anxieties altogether. And so the pattern that it talks about is you feel that gut physical reaction, you feel that gut emotional reaction, and then, hey, why am I thinking about this? Why is my spider sense going off, sort of thing?
Yeah.
And so often when I talk to people, I'm like, Spider-Man is like the best case for anxiety. He gets a spider sense and there's literally a car coming at him. We do a spider sense and we're like, oh, I was thinking about that thing I did yesterday where I slipped in front of people. And it's like at least with Spider-Man, like it's a consistent, like he gets the spider sense and he's like, oh, there's danger somewhere. And then for sure there is. And with humans, it's a natural process, right? This is what helped us on the out in the wild. We get this gut feeling, this emotional feeling of being scared or something's happening, and then we turn around and there's something stalking us. And we're like, oh, thanks, body.
Yeah.
But nowadays, when it comes to say social anxiety, it's like we get all this activation, and then we're like, it's because maybe this person will think I'm the worst human in the world. And meanwhile, they're like, I like, there's all those memes where it's like, I wonder what he's thinking about. He's thinking about other women. And the guy's like, is Wario Mario's brother or not?
Yeah. Those are the questions we need answered.
And so like most people, we can't mind read and we can't figure things out. So we end up just like a just in case behavior that ends up feeding up that we should have been activated. It could have been dangerous, and it probably was, and we can't handle just sitting in that thought. So we got to do something about it, And so what do? We do things like, do you think I'm cool or not? Do you like the tattoo or not? Can you please draw a bra on the breast on my back? Right? And it's like, instead of just kind of, because have you ever been to a convention or somewhere else where you had somebody comment on it?
No, never.
Exactly, right? But then you want to go so far, your mind is going so far into the being judged part that you'll go, this is not therapy, and you'll go all the way to get a Sharpie of a bra drawn on, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's amazing what our brain kind of makes us worry about. what it puts out there, as you know, as our spider said, like, this is dangerous, and therapy helps you go, no, it's not. It's fine.
Well, we do exposures like, okay, now from now on, every single time you go out in public, wear a backless whatever, and see what comments you get, and see if someone stops you, and see if, and I mean, statistically, someday someone will. I mean, I remember working with somebody like a couple of years ago, and they were worried. They had social anxiety, and they were worried about going to the grocery store. And I said, oh, well, why is that? And they said, well, you know, they would go shopping and they'd get food, and then they're worried people come over and judge them based on what they're shopping and like what they're buying.
That's a normal thing. I worked at a grocery store. Everybody fucking does that.
Yeah. So so she's like, or this person was like, yeah, I'm really worried that like someone will judge like what I'm ordering or what I'm getting. And I said, has someone ever come up and commented? And they're like, yeah, someone came up and grabbed the cookies out of my cart and said, no, you don't need this, and put it back on the shelf. And I said, oh wow. And so typically, you know, sometimes there's like one or two events that like then this will happen forever and it'll always happen. And I said, well, how often does that happen? I mean, you know, come on. She's like, you know, like 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, maybe it's the grocery store.
Yeah, maybe you should go somewhere else.
But I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that, you know, we sometimes either something happens and then we apply it to everything, or we're worried about that one thing happening. And then statistically, going back to the breast on your back, you know, I just like the phrase.
My back
but
boobs.
back boobs, yeah. Maybe statistically someday someone will come up and say something.
It's going to be offended by somebody. I mean, it's a demon chick sitting on a sword with their boobs out. Somebody's going to say something eventually.
But how many people will come up and comment that with a compliment, though, right?
Oh, well,
as opposed,
when I show people pictures, they're like, "Holy shit, that's awesome!" And I'm like, "Yeah." No, but so instance to for everybody there in chat, I've had many boyfriends. Had a boyfriend. We were
sounds like a flex right there. I've had many
and
boyfriends.
Girlfriends. There you go.
Oh, there you go. Bigger flex.
So I had a boyfriend. We were eating lunch at this place that we ate lunch at all the time. I decided to order something different. I didn't like it. Told the waitress I didn't like it. She said, "Okay, I'm going to take it back and we'll strike it off of your. Can I get you something different?" He made a scene. He made a scene about it. No, she'll have half of mine. He took it up. He took, like, boxed it up and took it home. It took me, I was 21, 22. I'm 40. I still have anxiety about ordering things I've never had before. And it's something I'm working on. And because of one incident, just one incident is all it took for my brain to go, well, we're never doing this again.
And we have a surprise for you now. We actually have the waitress from before. And she says she does not remember a thing about it in any single way. And I have another patron who was at the restaurant at the same time, and he also doesn't remember a thing that happened with her. And but I mean, again, right? It's a normal system of activation that's been kind of hijacked by Just In Case to start activating for these reasons. And you know, I think what's really kind of beautiful sometimes about doing treatment, say for social anxiety very specifically, you know, I'll meet people who they remember, you know, they're in their 50s or 40s and they remember their high school one-time event of something happening publicly. Like maybe they didn't get voted for, or maybe they, you know, like I don't know, like they had toilet paper on their shoe or whatever. And they remember that, you know, in their 40s and 50s forever. And then you start doing the treatment, and then by the end of the treatment, once you've done the exposures and you move through things, you know, I will bring up, hey, do you remember that high school thing? I haven't thought about it in like 3 months.
As soon as you said high school, like 4 different things popped in my head.
Yeah.
But here's my, like, for those of you who can't afford a therapist yet, because yay, the American healthcare system, I do things like, it happens in the shower all the goddamn time. It's the worst. I will do things like, I will say, thank you for remembering that. This memory is unnecessary. this is nothing we have to worry about, or nobody remembers this but me. So, like, I try to talk myself out of it.
Cognitive restructuring, yep.
Yeah. Don't therapize my words.
I was just labeling what you're doing, which is a very good thing.
It is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing, and it has helped quite a lot. And I know that I started, I'm 40. I'm still very young. But there's a lot of, like, unchecked mental illness that I have to work through. So this isn't going to be a thing that, like, is going to be fixed by next year. Like, this is something I'm just having to keep working on. And I'm going to have instances that pop up that my brain's going to be like, hey, do you remember this? Well, there's no reason for us to be embarrassed about it. Nobody fucking remembers you were 6. Nobody remembers.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I remember. Nobody remembers. Nobody cares.
There's 2 things that come to my mind when you talk about that. One is it's really from the cognitive behavioral background. Mm-hmm. It's really learning the art of doing absolutely nothing. So, like, a thought comes up, and so again, because often we're caught in those chains that just continue, you'll get the physical and the emotional reaction first, and then the thought will happen about why you're being activated. And then instead of feeding it with the bad behavior, it's feeding it with the subtle art of doing nothing, which is like, yep, no need. Yeah. And so learning that, and just, I mean, a lot of times when I work with people with generalized anxiety and worry or perfectionism, some of the exposures we do is when you come home from work, just sit for 20 minutes and just don't do anything. Don't doodle, don't make a list, don't look at your phone, just stare at the blank wall in a corner, don't do anything. And it's surprisingly difficult.
Have I done something personally to hurt you, Matt?
But that's the key, right? Like, it's really hard for people sometimes to just stop, because you're like, well, if I waste this 20 minutes, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this. But then, you're on Facebook for 3 hours, or you're, like, arguing with somebody about how they love Russia for, like, I don't know, 2 hours. But, it's you're already wasting time. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. The other thing that comes to my mind is what could be really helpful for people who can't afford therapy is, if you are self-motivated and you find yourself wanting to work on something, there are very specific workbooks that you can do and then pay for a session or 2 with a therapist to help catch you up. So sometimes I work for employee assistance plans sometimes, where, like, they have, say, 5 sessions. And so with people who only have 5 sessions, but they have this more complex issue, we have a healthcare system where you can refer to a wait list for, like, a year or 2 and then get free services. But if I'm working with somebody and they really want to address it right now, I'll say, why don't we buy the book? You read a couple chapters, you have a session with me, I will sum up what's the most important, see how your homework's doing, give you feedback on how to do it. And then, like, it's that idea of having somebody just to guide you a little bit, even if you could squeeze together some money, find someone on a sliding scale, something like that, someone who's very familiar with the book. You can get a lot out of it, because 99% of the session happens when you're not in session. It's all that digestion and all that work afterwards. Yeah. When I ask you to monitor how you're feeling in different moments, 3 times a day, and then talk about it later, you're doing all that work, and so I think it's important, because someone can kind of set you off and say, okay, like, let's try this, try it, come back, and we'll talk a little bit about how it went and how to improve it. But the books are, like, there's a lot of good workbooks that basically will do the job of the therapist. When I started, workbooks guided me on what to do. Now I'm the one who's already doing what the guidebook's going to tell you to do. So I think that's really important, because you can still get some good help with different anxieties and depression and such by doing a workbook, a therapy workbook. There are so many, like, unfuck yourself books, and, like, the subtle art of not giving a shit, and it's helpful, but you want to know where that workbook is deviating from more specific therapy into just kind of folklore, philosophical, half CBT kind of stuff,
Yeah, I have You're Weird, You Are Weird, mm-hmm. as a book, and it's not a therapy workbook. I can afford my therapist, thankfully. Yay, insurance. But I do like using it to, like,
supplement
to, like, because it's like, what are 3 fun things? So me having PTSD, I am now trying to think, like, I'm trying to force myself to, like, okay, what are 3 fun things that I've done. So that helps for me. And like the like the art of not giving. Wasn't it Zen as fuck was another one a therapist recommended to me. Get Zen as fuck. And these are just things for me to do on my own time. But you're right. I take all of these things that happen, and then as soon as I get into my hour therapy session, I'm like, all right, well, this is what happened. And then we just unpack it. I just dump a bag on the floor, and she's like, all right, let's see what's in here. What did you bring me this week?
Yeah.
The cat at the door with the dead rat. Like, here, brought you present.
What does this rat mean?
But yeah, it's amazing how much that we don't realize that we are the ones doing the work.
Yeah, I kin myself to a personal trainer sometimes. So one, I'm gonna recommend some exercises that are very specific to like, I'm gonna recommend a treatment course that will help most people, and it'll also hopefully be tailored to you. The second piece is I'm going to as I was just saying, tailor it to the person. And then 3, when you do 10 reps, I'm going to say, can you do 2 more? Let's push ourselves a little more. And when I get to the point where I'm doing exposures with people after several sessions, they get I want them to use their own voice, but they use my voice. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, Matthew would say that I'm supposed to do, and I should. So then I did it. And I'm like, yeah, I want you to replace my voice with your voice eventually. But yes, that's exactly what I would say in that moment at that time. Right. And
I think I think sometimes that's an important part for those. Well, for me, I use my therapist voice a lot in my head, but in my head it's in place of like that shit your mom would have said, like if you had a good mom, like the shit your parents would have said when you were a kid. Like that's now just what my therapist says, and that's actually better. My mom said terrible things, so instead of that, it's like I talk a lot about the first thought that pops into your head. We talk about that often because that's a learned thought process from things that I've read. That's how you grew up. You were grown up to that's the atmosphere you grew up in. The second thought you have is what you really think. Like the snap judgment, and then it's like, no. This. You could do it. Oh my God, you can do it for anything. Like me with my pink hair. You look at me and say, oh God, she's probably working at a record store or, whatever older people would say. And
at a DVD store.
At a DVD store with those VHS tapes. But the reality of it is, like, I'm just a mom who, wants to have
who did a charity
pink hair
event. Yeah. But I think you're right. Like, and when you go back to things like trauma, having your hot thought, again, how I frame it is, these hot thoughts are super helpful to help you survive to 40. They're not really helpful now because you're not also tiny and defenseless and other things. But it's hijacking a normal system and then using it for a just-in-case survival mode. And then when we hit a later age, it's like, okay, well, I don't need it anymore. But the brain's like, I burned that into your brain hard. Yeah, like, good luck getting it out, And again, hijacking an old thing. As cave people, if I go to a cave and I fight a bear, every time I go to a cave after that, I'm going to be the guy who can't shut up. There are bears in caves. There are bears. Pay attention to this. And that's really helpful in my village or in my crew, being the bear yeller, even though there's no bears. But nowadays it's like, well, what do we have to yell about? Oh, that thing that happened in childhood that could only happen because I was a kid stuck in this family doing this thing. Well, what about now? And it's like, yeah, that'll never happen again. And if it does, it'll be completely different, and it probably won't. And so how do I unburn that in my brain?
So one thing that pops up for me, I'm gonna say this, we'll talk about this for a second, then we'll take a quick break. But one of the things, so when I was a kid, I had a crush on this guy, like almost until high school, who, by the way, is bald now, and that makes me so fucking happy. He was a terrible human being. And I remember interactions with that, and it made me feel like worthless and stuff like that. Now that I'm 40, I have to remind myself, one, that was one person's opinion when I was like 6. 2, he's bald. Throw that in there.
Hair karma.
Yeah. 3, like they're like, not only do other people find me sexy, I find myself incredibly sexy and attractive, and that's what matters. So fuck that dude.
Well, you know what? Actually, I was thinking about this. Let's not bald shame either. That's another piece. No, but seriously,
you're right. You're right. Yeah. I should not bald shame.
But I think it's maybe frame it as like he didn't want to lose his hair and he did. It's things burned into us from a long time ago, and then it just keeps surfacing now, and it's misfiring.
Yeah. So, all right, we're gonna take a quick break because I have to pee. And then we're going to come back and maybe talk about some red flags of therapists. How's that sound? All right. Get your water, go to the bathroom, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Well, welcome back, us. I don't know if you guys got up, but we did.
We went to the washroom, yes.
Yes.
Separately, of course.
Obviously, us being in two different countries.
Yes. Yes. It's like that when you look at the moon thing and then someone else is looking at the moon too.
Great. Now every time we go in a bathroom break during a TTRPG, I'm going to think about that. Thanks.
Is Matthew going on a bathroom break now? I wonder.
So therapist.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm making Matt into a streamer, the therapist. You should.
Yes, I appreciate it. Yeah.
You should follow him, and you should harass him during his streams.
When we get ramped up, you can call out. I'm primarily going to play Dead by Daylight, but it's going to be a lot of calling out of my tunneling, my camping, my being mean to people, and then apologizing to them because I got too into it. Stuff like that.
I have a YouTuber that Vel watches that you should probably.
What's the name?
I can't remember.
This will be quite difficult to view these videos without a name.
Well, yes. I will get it for you later. I don't know the
good.
name now, but
no free advertising.
No. But yeah, no, he's like a complete. He tunnels and everything like that, and people like give him shit for it. Mm-hmm. And he just loves because he puts people up like when they start whining and bitching, like he shows the
Spooks
chat.
And Jukes, I think it is.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I follow him as well. He's got a really nice ghost face tattoo all down his arm with the Noed right here, but it's like a really nice has like roses and stuff. I'm pretty sure, and
yes,
I could be wrong, but
yes,
yeah.
I saw that he got the Noed tattoo, and I was like, it's dedication. And then I was like, fuck, what Dead by Daylight tattoo would I get?
I think I if I ever get a tattoo one day, maybe that'll be it. I have freckles, which are enough, but
I have freckles and tattoos. You can do it too. So, red flags for therapists. I think this is a huge one that people don't pay attention to. Because not just because they're a therapist doesn't mean they're a good therapist or a good person.
Well, no, I think, I think one of the things that comes up I'll mention a couple of things that comes up to my mind before red flags that'll help with red flags is, it would be very difficult if you were struggling with mental health issues, depending on the severity, to then be an advocate to somebody who you're paying to see who says they'll get you better or they'll help you through that. So even to begin with, it's not like going to a restaurant, you order food and then the food's not what you think it is. So you say, can you bring this back? You don't risk losing a therapist or losing time you spent paying for that therapist. It is very difficult to speak up and speak out. And it's also probably one of those symptoms that a lot of people have with anxiety is not wanting to rock the boat or be too needy or if they've had a million therapists before because, say, emotional dysregulation issues where you're upset about being upset. So you'll often run through therapists because they're just not right or you don't like them and stuff. So, I mean, it's what I'm saying is basically even before you begin, I can recognize it's very difficult to when you meet with somebody, because you have to have faith that they'll help you as much as they have faith that they can help, vice versa, sort of thing. So there's that. The other thing is therapist. There's a lot of different people that do a lot of different stuff. And so really, I don't think there's a good shopping guide for people's credentials and people's backgrounds and because you have people's training, what they call themselves, the work they actually do. And then also there's what they engage in. And there's so many different things out there. Like there is therapist, counselor, life coach. There's different types of play therapy, which are very different as well. There is...
we have social workers.
Social workers, there's case managers, there's Reiki Master 10s, there's all sorts of stuff.
There's a Reiki Master 10.
There you go, right? So there's a lot of different backgrounds to be therapeutic. And so I think, it's very difficult and what I do a lot with my private practice is I'll meet somebody and we'll do the initial assessment. And I say, I think this is what would be most helpful from this background. And so it's just my opinion. It's just based on what I'm seeing. I don't diagnose, but I think I'm tasting flavors of this, and these are the course of treatment. And I think it's hard because, even when you go to your family doctor, they're not mental health specialists. So some of them are more or less trained in it and they might try a medication like Cipralex because it's it's an anti-anxiety, antidepressant, and maybe it'll cure everything in the end. So it's like there's a lot of different people with a lot of different backgrounds. So it's really getting to know, like getting a good opinion from somebody on what might address that issue and how many sessions that's going to take, and what that treatment, what were the best practices for that sort of issue. And so that's why sometimes I'll recommend people seeing a psychiatrist first to get diagnoses or get an impression, so that then you can seek out, because a lot of people don't like labels as well. I can go on and on and on, but a lot of people don't like labels because labels then, well, if that gets passed around, people will know, or people will treat me differently. But if you don't get diagnosed, or you don't have an impression that maybe these symptoms are, congruent with borderline personality disorder, or congruent with bipolar, or congruent with whatever, then it's hard to seek out the medication that might help and the treatments that might help. So I think it's a double-edged sword. So when we go to red flags, I do bring things back to the start. When we do red flags, it's trust your gut. Because there should be at no point, you should always be able to speak with your therapist and say, I don't like the way things are going. I don't like the direction things are going. Or how many more sessions do you think we will need to cover this? Or even do we have a treatment plan of how many sessions you think that will take for us to kind of go through this piece? It's not set in stone, but I think there's a whole other type of therapy that you could provide, or even add into cognitive behavioral, called psychodynamic. And psychodynamic, a lot of it's leveraging the relationship between the client and the therapist to address defense mechanisms and other things. It's a bit butchering of the whole topic, but the idea is that you really do, as a therapist, what it has helped me with is calling out things in session. Hey, I feel like we're not connecting here. Is there an issue, or is there something that I'm not aware of that's coming up? Or, hey, I feel like, we're disconnected in some way, or maybe I aggravated you with a comment, or where do you think that's coming from? Because it's very hard sometimes, being on the receiving end of services, to say, hey, we've done 5 sessions and I feel like we haven't done anything. Or, hey, I'm gonna, the biggest thing I do with private is how much money you got, or how much services you got. Because if you can only pay for 3 sessions, then maybe we shouldn't go down this road, or maybe we should seek out some alternatives, because you never want to start something with somebody when you can't finish, but you also don't want to start something with somebody and have no idea how long it's going to take, or what the journey looks like. So that's one of the big things that I'm going to add in is treatment plans are huge. And then on top of that, go with your gut. If you feel you're not getting something out of this, that already is a big conflict or boundary in the actual sessions,
I mean, my therapist, I was seeing for years now, a good portion of the beginning of therapy was just, as you said, coffee talk, because I wasn't ready to dip beneath the surface. So once I was comfortable and everything like that, and then of course we were dealing with a lot of surface stress, surface conflict, but it takes time. So everything is going to take time. It's not going to overnight. It's going to take work, but I do. So when I was a teenager, I felt connected to maybe one therapist. And she was a student. So she was closer to my age. No, 2. I had a mobile therapist, too, which is great for trauma. We're going to take you outside of the house and we're going to talk. We went to Bob Evans a lot. I ate a lot of breakfast. But, if that connection for me is necessary. I need to, and then I've had friends who talked about the one red flag that I've been told of that people have is therapists who talk about themselves a lot. Now, I have had
I can definitely speak to that,
Yeah, I've had therapists who will talk to me about themselves or their lives to relate. And I understand that that's what we're doing. They're opening up, letting me understand and trust them. We relate. But I have talked to people who have been my therapy session was just my therapist complaining about their life for an hour. And I'm like, that's not therapy. It's reverse therapy. They're using you. Or somebody said that the last therapy they had just felt like conversations, and that wasn't really what they were looking for. They were looking for
Yeah.
treatment. They were looking for something deeper. So there's always something, but I think you're right. Like the one thing is being able, like, it's hard to go to therapy to begin with. Like that's not it
Absolutely.
was not an easy process for me. I had to tell people I was going to start therapy for like 2 years before I started therapy,
Mm.
and even then it was difficult and hard. And now here I am sitting on my 5-year therapy horse, going, "You need therapy. Everybody should go to therapy," as if I didn't like inch my way out of a closet, saying, "Okay, I might like to see a therapist, maybe, please." So so yeah, it's difficult to begin with, but it's hard to like, what, this isn't working. I'm gonna try somebody else. I
Yeah.
can't imagine having done that at the beginning of my therapy.
And you paid for those sessions,
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part, is that no one, if your money's always valuable, if your money is valuable. But if
Mm-hmm.
your time and money is valuable, and you don't want to ever, like, I can't think of something in parallel, maybe other people can, where like you could pay for something and it wouldn't go through and it wouldn't match, but you put in such a commitment of time, getting to know somebody, telling your story, and then also that financial piece. And so when you talk about the boundaries, though, I love it, because I think newer therapists, or those who are practicing more of that skill building, or like the coping strategy piece, or even just like counseling as opposed to treatment, I remember I've made that mistake in the past, and one of the things I've always kind of fallen back on is anything I reveal about myself. Well, even to begin with, there are things you're going to notice about me,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to guess about me, and you're going to know about me that I can't hide. You know, being a white male with red hair, that's me. You're going to see
Mm-hmm.
me. That's it, right? And there are aspects of my life that will trickle out because you will ask. And I know, a lot of a lot of beginners are like, you know, the client will say, are you married? And it's like, what does that mean to you, if I was married or not? And then never answer the question. But it's that idea of like, yes, answer questions directly, but also then ask why. So for me, I do some couples work. And so people ask me if I'm married. And so that then will help inform them whether they should trust me or not for the couples work or something like that, right? But those are interesting discussions, and those are places to go. The difference is when you volunteer information about yourself and your own struggles. And I think, the guiding principle I've always used is, if you're going to mention something about yourself, it has to be 900,000% about beneficial to the client. If you're mentioning, if there's even one inkling that you're mentioning it for your own like methods in some way, or your own, if you feel that you're not connecting with the person or whatever, then there's an issue. Because, and again, there's lots of different opinions on this. Like there's some people who are more humanistic, who will be like, we should, talk about our shared experience. For me, in my practice, doing mostly treatment with cognitive behavioral therapy, I really don't have to reveal a lot about myself in order to help someone through it. You look at addictions work, some people are like, well, I only want to be with somebody who's actually experienced the same thing. Okay, well then I would suggest more peer support, or the like RAP programs, which are run by survivors for survivors, stuff like that, or
Mm-hmm.
AA or NA or whatever. Um, but I guess when it comes down to boundaries, it's like, it's such a slippery slope where you can start to begin to either feel your life expertise is enough for you to give therapy in it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or like, oh, I've been through this before with my grandson, so I can talk to you about this. Like, full disclosure for me, so I have a son who's 7 years old who's on the autism spectrum. When I give advice about system navigation, I will stop the therapy aspect. Like, if someone calls me out of the blue and I haven't delivered therapy with them, I will say, you can either hear from a parent advocate or from a therapist. And if you want to hear from the parent advocate, I will never be your therapist, but I can help you as a local parent who's had my own struggles, connecting my son with resources.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that in a friendly way. I will never deliver therapy to you, though, unfortunately, because that is a boundary where, if that is where I'm going to act. Because the more you mix up boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine, and especially they talk about this a lot in different textbooks about working with people, you're giving unconditional support as a therapist. So it is only natural for people to start developing different feelings towards somebody who's giving them unconditional support. And so if your boundaries are not strong as a therapist, then the person will almost instinctively, subconsciously push a bit.
Yeah.
And they might call you at inappropriate hours because they think of you as somebody who's such a big support that you wouldn't mind that, or that you're the person they go to for help. So it's okay to call after hours or in emergencies or whatever. And so it's, I know a lot of therapists, and I provide clinical supervision as well, is the kind of next piece I'm going into in life. But, it's about setting boundaries, not because you don't care, but because like you want to keep that boundary so strong to help the person from that position, because you have so many different power dynamics, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
go, be free, be free, be free.
close the door. Speaking of boundaries, no, I 100% get that. As somebody who has PTSD, complex PTSD, which, for those of you who do not know, complex PTSD typically is just from prolonged abuse. I say typically because I am not a therapist and I didn't read anything about this. This is just from my own perspective. But it is typically prolonged abuse. Mine is from childhood abuse. And so I could, without my medication, without my years of therapy, I could very well see myself, because I think I did have an attachment to my first therapist, and I can see that happening because here is a person who is proud of me and they're proud of the work I'm doing, and these are all things that I never received as a child. So I 100% could understand that boundary being crossed very quickly. Like, I have my therapist's cell phone number. I don't think it's her personal cell phone. I think it's a work phone. But either way, I will text her when something amazing happened, and she'll talk about it. Like, we'll bring it up at the next therapy session, or if I am. And of course, this is like maybe once a month she gets a text from me. My husband also can text her if I am in a crisis situation or an emergency in which he feels that he cannot handle, but doesn't, call for 911. That doesn't mean she's going to answer. Because she also has a life. She has other clients. She has a family to take care of. So these are all things that, like, we need to constantly remind ourselves of. And yes, when she says she's proud of me, it feels good. Whereas my mom says she's proud of me and it feels empty. But that's because she's seen the work that I put in and she's helped me with that work. So those are things that we always have to recall. When, like, at the end of the day, this is wonderful. They're proud of you. Your therapists are proud of you. They want nothing but the best for you. But they are a professional that you are paying. And they are not your best friend.
And you can see even after, actually one thing that comes to my mind is even our relationship, right?
We have a very odd relationship.
But you can really fall into those pieces when, okay, the therapy's done, and then the person's like, wow, you're kind of person I want to go grab a beer with. Mm-hmm. And it's like, thanks, but no thanks. Oh, but I thought we did all these things together and we made breakthroughs. And I think, it's, with me, for my ethics, it's one, you always fall back on whatever profession you're regulated by, and by the for me, it's the College of Social Workers in Ontario. Mm-hmm. But the other piece too is that, even I forgot your name, Margot. It's gonna say Crymson or something. But you know what, like, I think one thing we had made clear even before this was, okay, so, you participated in the TTRPG thing, and then now it is done. And so now if we're doing, say, a professional piece like this, we will never, ever do therapy again. Yes. Are you okay with this? Is this the way it's going? You don't have to agree right now. But, like, it's that idea of, like, yeah. But that's the boundary, right? Because when we talk about ethical breaches or any sort of boundaries, if it feels a twinge weird, that is the threshold for most colleges and most professions to say, no touchy. Yeah. And so, it's always about being upfront and talking about it and being open to that kind of piece. And, I think, it's so hard. I can't even get therapists sometimes to call out. Like, I just had a supervision recently with somebody where I was supervising or consulting. And, it's like, I have difficulties working with this person. Okay, why do you have difficulties with this person? Because they're just presenting as themselves. They're bringing this into the session. And nine out of 10, it's because, well, they're taking the control of the session and they're moving off into places I don't want to, or they remind me of my uncle, and and it's like, you need to sort that out in session and talk to the person then, because. And I say that as well for red flags when it comes down to therapists, or even a client working with therapists. Call it out, ask questions, talk, because go with your gut is a big piece of it. If this doesn't feel right, like I have heard of people in my community who do couples work solely to isolate the husband from the wife and then text the wife inappropriately later. Yeah.
Wow.
To provide support. Like, it starts as a
Wow.
subtle piece and it can move into more manipulative aspects. So not everybody is there. Not everyone is aware of their boundaries. Some people think it's okay to do certain things. Some people are unregulated, so they'll never have their hand slapped by anybody in particular. So it's really about trusting your gut. If you feel like, I was just reviewing, we get like a little journal or article about like all the people who are being penalized by the college for the bad behavior they do. And most of them are sleeping with clients. And it's the idea, but one of them I was reviewing recently was just like saying inappropriate things in session. Like, the client had said something like, oh, I don't feel attractive anymore, blah, blah, blah. And the therapist is like, no, you're damn hot. Like, oh, okay. It feels good. It's a value statement, but where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And so the therapist might just say, well, I'm just trying to provide reassurance that they are actually attractive based on abstract ways of blah, blah, blah. But it's kind of a value judgment too. Like, and so it's just icky. Anything that feels icky or anything else, that's the whole summary for red flags.
Icky.
Is if this doesn't feel right, then you call it out, you talk about it, and you are, as a client, you are under no obligation to continue with anybody in the world.
Right.
You need to cut your losses and just go, then you just cut your losses and go. It sucks. You put in investment, time, someone getting to know your story, money. But, if it's just not right, it's just not right.
It's especially hard, when you're in situations where you leave it. It's especially hard when you're in situations where you've delved into that, under that surface of yours, and all of a sudden this is not a safe place. It's not a trusted spot. So that can feel awkward. But at the end of the day, all that matters is that you feel safe and comfortable. And it's not going to feel comfortable to start, but you feel safe. Is it a safe place? Do you feel safe here? Do you feel comfortable talking to this person? Do you feel comfortable with this person knowing things about you? Those are all things that you have to address. And if it's no to any of them, you can find another therapist. And here's the nice thing. Most therapists are very understanding.
Yeah.
Like, it's not working. If it's not working, that's fine. I can, and even to the point where they'll recommend. I can recommend somebody who might be better for you, or because therapists, there's a network. They do talk to each other. They work with each other. There are other people that they are aware of that does therapy. So it's something like, and if you bring up, I don't think this is working, and your therapist has a fit, you need to run from that person. Please.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, I've had people say this isn't going to work, or I've had a brilliant first session, and then I get it, and then they're like, I like you, you're the one, blah, blah, blah. And then, I get an email later, here's the 5 things why I'm never going to go to you again. And it's like, or like at first it's like, we're just not going to go forward. Okay, well, what's some feedback on what I can do better, or like things that didn't really work out? Here's the 5 things. And it's like, okay, then I can address this. I can't address that. I can't address this. This is preposterous, but I'll never tell you. And sure, okay. And then it's like, oh, thank you for the feedback. I will use it in some way. Like it should be that way. And I think a lot of times therapists don't like to be observed. They don't like to go and talk about therapy because someone might misquote them, or that they feel like they've overstated something, like I am right now. Or like they don't want to have somebody see a video of them performing therapy in some way. Like, it's all these pieces that I guess therapists are people too. And you can kind of bring your flaws into sessions sometimes. Yeah. And that's where it's good to have that clinical supervision or consultation where you can talk about aspects of that, and get feedback from clients directly. And I mean, when I first started my business, I was sending out feedback forms to every single person I saw that year to get feedback.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just it's things like that where like therapy, just like TTRPG, is a collaborative process.
Yes.
And I think if for some reason you don't feel it's collaborative, you can call it out on either side too.
Yeah.
I don't like dragging people through things. Oh God, I do not.
No.
Like you know, like we're gonna do this. I don't want to. Okay, well then we don't. But like this is what I think the path is forward, and you know, I think it'll be really helpful. But you don't have to.
My therapist
I think
dragged me through things. I
Yeah.
don't want to. Well, too bad.
No. But you built a rapport enough.
Yes.
I'm sure that it's this pseudo consent of you
Yeah.
saying yes, please drag me a little bit through things.
Yeah. No, she is aware. You get off the box. Harley's obsessed with chewing cardboard. Get away from the box. But no, what's really funny to me is that Matt, the therapist, and Matt, you know, the everyday person, are two completely different people.
Yes.
And it's funny because I had only known you as Matt the therapist, so when, you know, we started hanging out as Matt the person, I was like, I don't know what I was expecting, but that was not it. You're like, yes, I'm gonna go kill people in Dead by Daylight. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And the love for horror, you know? And that's a great thing. That just shows how good you are about what you do, because I had no idea you were this weird.
Well, your therapist is a person too. And red flag wise, when they are more of a person, I mean, again, like there's a lot of leakage of your personal into the work you do. That's just a natural process.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it's using your strengths of character and the style you do to help with the therapy, as opposed to and then trying to work on your weaknesses or your biases leaking into sessions. I think that's a huge piece for anybody who's delivering services to somebody and working with somebody. Absolutely. So.
Yeah. And it again, therapy, like if you are trying to go to therapy, or if you're in therapy, I'm so proud of you. It is hard. It is hard because essentially you're putting yourself first. Therapy is self-care, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's a difficult thing, especially in today when we're, you know, we talk about self-care, but we don't really talk about what self-care really is. Because it's more than just, you know, I'm going to self-care. Like we make the comment about that you killed Donald Duck. That's fine. We make the comment about like, as a mom, I'm like, oh well, I'm gonna go take a nap. I'm gonna self-care today and take a nap. No, you're a person. You can go take a nap. Like if you have time to take a nap, take a nap. That's not a self-care thing. Self-care is making sure that your cup is full, like you are replenished, you are feeling good, you are taking time off, which is something I am discovering now that I am 40, are things that I need to do. I need to have days off where I'm not working and I'm taking care of myself. And without these things, I burn out very quickly. And then it's not only burnout, then like ADHD or my ADD takes over, and then we start getting into the I have too much to do panic, so I don't do anything. So self-care is really important, and therapy is 100% self-care, part of the self-care. The 18 medications that I'm on is 100% of self-care. My husband complained about how much they cost recently. I was like, I could stop taking them. And Vaughn, who's in chat, said, please don't. I would be scared. To which my daughter said, I would also be scared. She is 7. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ground her for a month. You've no idea what you should be scared of. But yeah, it's 100% self-care.
And I think, you know what, I think you bring up a good point too about working with therapists. And again, you know, like different people offer different things. Like I know I had mentioned the Reiki masterpiece, and you know what, like if you go to somebody who performs Reiki and you feel better, absolutely great. If you're going to go see somebody for Reiki and you're looking for more of that cognitive behavioral talk, maybe that person's not trained in that. But it's really seeking out, you know, through trial and error, sometimes through research and such, looking for what's best practice, what other people have talked about, and like what you feel fits for you at this point. Because you know, red flag wise, if someone just keeps telling you what to do, that's not therapy. You can, and I tell people, I'm like, you can go seek that from your friends and family. I'm not going to tell you what to do because I only see you for 50 minutes. And if I told you what my personal advice was for the situation, it might be the worst thing in the world, and your marriage will end, and you'll be destitute. But it's that idea of, a lot of times, therapy as a practice is taking what you present to the person, and then they will deconstruct it based on the therapy that they're utilizing. Utilizing is the worst word I'll use. And breaking it apart and then looking at some of the patterns that happen. So napping is a great example. I'm a grown adult and I can take a nap for self-care. Well, how often do you nap? Every day. Okay. And how's your sleep? Terrible. Huh. And do you find you're staying up late at night but not being and sleeping during the day? Yes, I am. Huh. How's your motivation? Terrible. How's your energy? Terrible. How's your appetite? Terrible. Huh. So maybe the napping is maybe more of an avoidance rather than a self-care. Well, maybe. I don't know. Let's look into it. Let's talk about it, because that's the aspect I think is much more helpful than just like stop it, or like do something different, or like take your melatonin. I think again, a lot of it is working with the person at their pace and not just giving advice, because again, like, you get to know somebody, but you're not living in their shoes for longer than maybe 50 minutes per week or 50 minutes per 2 weeks or whatever. So
yeah, especially since like I could easily tell you, I have a terrible time falling asleep. Okay, but if we don't go into it, you're not going to know that I have a terrible time falling asleep because my brain doesn't shut off and I just keep thinking, and there's no way for me, like, if I'm not taking like a handful of things to make me fall asleep, then I'm just going to be up all night. And then sleep is riddled with nightmares. So you're taking
from TTRPG, I understand.
Yeah, from TTRPGs. And if you don't dive into it, then we're never going to know why I have trouble. It's just, oh, well, you have trouble sleeping. That's terrible. No, I'm on 4 medications now, so I can actually go to sleep and I don't, dream of being stabbed in a parking lot anymore. This is not your power hour. Can you stop?
The dog stream is in 2 hours. Thank you very much.
Are you?
So pet therapy is a different type of therapy.
But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Like, I hate taking showers. Why do I hate taking showers? Well, because if I don't have my Bluetooth speaker on playing K-pop that I'm singing along to, then I have to think my own thoughts and feel my feelings, and that's just unacceptable. We don't do that in this house. We do not think our own thoughts or feel our own feelings, unless in Kanto-san. That's the only time it's acceptable.
So what are some other red flags? We got boundaries. We have knowing the professional knows how to work with or treat or counsel or help with a certain condition or certain set of symptoms, or just tailoring it to who you are. There's using your gut feelings. What else is there, do you think, that comes to your mind when it comes to red flags?
I think a big one for me, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, my therapist would then like inform my parents about what we talked about, and I'm like, could we not? Like, there's obviously an issue between me and my parents, or not listening to me. I'd have therapists not listen to me, or think that I was making things up. My parents seem like such nice people.
Let's break that down for a second, though.
Okay.
What does not listening to you mean?
Like telling them.
What does that look like from the outside?
Telling them that I like my mom hit me. Okay, this happened one time. My mom hit me with a hammer. Because I snuck out of the house. She hammered my window shut. That's not a fire hazard at all. So I ran off. I ran away. And when I told the next therapist about it, they're like, if she had really hit you with a hammer, you would have had to go to the hospital. No, that's not how that works. Not all the time.
Yeah. So that's clearly somebody who is listening, but doesn't believe you, right?
Yes.
And I think, yeah, that's a very clear example of, of probably having a bias that maybe this isn't true or not. I mean, like, I think it's always interesting because I come from two different angles. When I used to work crisis, I would have people who would either lie on purpose or are delusional, and they'd be like, "Yeah, I fired off a gun in the parking lot." Okay, well, where's the gun now? I threw it in the bushes. Where'd you get the gun from? Jail. Were you even in jail? No. Okay. And like, where's the bullets? I don't know. And wouldn't you be worried some kid might find that gun? No. Okay. Like, and so you're doing that more for the purpose of like, you've met with this person many, many times, and you're like trying to figure out why they're making these elaborate stories. I mean, at the end of the day, it was really just to get the attention of police so that, this person could, get more attention in their daily life because they're bored. But, it's so interesting you say that as a kid, right? Where you said I got hit with a hammer and then nothing's done, because that's why literally these accreditation bodies and other sort of colleges and stuff come up and say, if you hear anything, you have to report. And so that's why they do it, because when I if I hear something like that, I'm like, even if I don't want to, there's a part of me that's like, oh, now I gotta call people and like do this and like, okay, all right, now I got it, and I think that's just, I think, you were getting that stuff back, what, like 30, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So
25 years ago. And
that's why I think a lot more people were preyed on that way, is because a lot of professionals just kind of brush stuff off or whatever sort of thing. I don't think you'll get the same response these days.
No.
And I think that's, again, a part of the times, right? And so, if you feel that you bring up something in session and your therapist just glazes over it, again, unfortunately, as the client, it's harder to say, hey, why are we moving on from this? Hey, why didn't you say anything about this? Because they should be able to tell you their process or why they're thinking about what they do or what they're doing, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's what the whole 25 years ago is something that I talk about often in therapy, because Child Protective Services would never called over like so many therapists and everything like that, and it's like, you hear me saying things,
I know, yeah,
but you're not doing anything about it. Besides, you get out of the box. God. But yeah, not doing anything about it. It should have been at the time, but obviously was not a huge red flag for me. Like, and I've asked my my first new therapist, whatever, my last therapist, about, because she also worked with children, and we would talk about it, and she goes, I call CPS like at least once a week, for the kids' intake or whatever she had to do. And she was like, oh yeah, 100%, I hear something wrong and I'm on the phone. And if they check and it's fine, it's better than they not check and it's not fine.
Well, and even the thing you brought up about telling everything that you say in session to parents, that's a tricky thing, because under a certain age, it depends on the agency you're working for, if you're working private and the healthcare acts and stuff like that, because there is a duty to report to parents. Like, I used to run into it here in Ontario as a difficult piece, because my threshold for telling parents about what's happening with their kids, say at 15, is different on a crisis team. But if the school I go interact with, they have a legal obligation that any student, they have to tell the parents what's going on. So they would tell the parents and I wouldn't, because the kid says, please don't. And so, but I mean, even in those instances, what a great opportunity to just talk about what is going on. Why, like, if you say, or not you, let's depersonalize it. If anybody says, yeah, don't tell my parents, my first question is, what are you worried is going to happen? What are you worried about in general? Why should your parents not know that you're talking about this or about this item? What's the fear? What's the concern? What's the whatever, right? And like, it's difficult, say, in private practice, because maybe the parents are paying.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you give me updates? And I want to know the progress, and I want to know this. I, to date, have not had an issue where I couldn't tell the parents, because I work it out with the youth, or I work it out with somebody and say, well, like, what are you worried is going to happen? Like, say it's a secret. Like, I feel I am gay and I don't want to tell my parents. Okay, so we don't have to, right? Because that's not risk level, like there's suicide, homicide, psychosis, like it's not that, right? That would make sense. But I would encourage the person, hey, I think at some point you're going to have to tell them though. And maybe or maybe not, depending on your situation. Or what is the worry if you do tell them? Oh, they told me that they would disown me. Okay, maybe let's not. It's that idea of really having that conversation about the whys. Because I think what ends up happening, and what you were talking about, and what happened probably more so back in the day, is like just skim over. I have a million cases, and like I don't want to go into depth over this, or I don't want to, I have to tell your parents too bad. But I mean, bringing in the parents to talk with the kid about everything going on is huge too. So I don't know, it just depends.
That was terrible for me. We did family therapy, and it was just my parents yelling. It was just 3 people yelling at each other for like an hour. And they're like,
do you feel the person that was handling all this was competent though?
No.
Well, there you go.
I don't. Like, I being through...
But was it more Jerry Springer than therapy?
Yeah, it was 100%.
So then there you go.
So
right?
there's, I thankfully / unthankfully have the ability to sit down and go, well, I can see where people seriously fucked up. Like, because I brought my husband into therapy with me. Like, we weren't, like, in therapy for a reason, but, like, I do occasionally bring friends with me to talk about things. And it's not like hey, we need to talk about this. It's like, I would like you to address with my therapist things that you feel that I'm not talking about or I should be working on. Because again, she sees me for an hour a week. There's so many things happening in my life that she doesn't see. And I could be forgetting about something, or I could be doing something that I don't even realize I'm doing. So that helps me that way. But even like her and I had a long discussion about what was going to happen before I brought people to therapy with me, and how like there would be no yelling if things were getting upset.
Ground
she
rules.
would mediate, 100%. And if she didn't think it was being helpful, then she would shut the session down. So those rules, to my knowledge, never happened.
I know, yeah.
With my parents. It was just like, I'm like, I could get this at home and be comfortable, but now I'm sitting in a hard ass chair getting yelled at.
Yeah.
So therapy has changed quite a lot.
So is it safe to say maybe that all wasn't therapy, and maybe it was more case management or coping skills or something?
I have no idea what it was. It was a terrible waste of my time and an emotional trauma.
You know what? It goes back to the red flags, right? If you're in a process that is hurting you more than helping you, again, you couldn't really advocate at the time, But I mean, it's again, this process. And when I say hurting more than helping, it's always interesting because for me, I love exposure therapy, and exposure therapy is definitely when I start a course of treatment with somebody, I'm like, when we look at the risk and benefits, usually the benefits are like super reduction in symptoms. And when I talk about the risks, I'm like, you will definitely be more anxious than you've ever been in your life, because what we're going to do is you're walking a tightrope under a wire. And what we're going to talk about is really removing the idea that you're on a tightrope and you're not just walking. And secondarily, the first thing we're going to do though is take away that wire, that like under mesh, to prove that even if you do fall, it's not going to be the worst and you can handle it. And so it's really like a classically good example is if we're working on obsessive compulsive issues. I have an intrusive thought that my significant other will die unless I tap 3 times. So when we look at the therapy later with exposures and with ritual prevention, it's like, I guess we're going to risk their lives by not tapping. So let's not tap and see if they pass away.
Yeah.
Okay. I would feel really bad if they did.
Like, that would be, as a therapist, that would be the worst time for somebody to randomly have a heart attack.
Yeah, but again, you look at the stats, right? Is this person healthy? Is this person not, licking bus poles? Are they not like anti-vax and they're going to specifically go out to rallies? But I mean, it's really about cognitive. Like we can logically work through anything. It's the feeling base that really, really happens to get in the way. The just in cases.
Yeah.
And I think again, being able to talk about this with your therapist, being able to say to your therapist, I don't like this, or I don't want to go forward, or please, can we stop and just explain why we're doing this, is so huge. And it sucks to put the onus on the client for that. and hopefully the therapist is cluing in and is aware and sees the cringe moments and like sees the person. Like the biggest indicator to me that somebody's having a hard time following through is when they don't do the homework. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to chastise you and say like, I can't believe you didn't do the homework I told you to do. Maybe it's an indication that the person's not ready, or there's something missing, or that it's really hard and we can adjust the difficulty. Like there's so many things to kind of consider, but it's not taking things personally.
Yeah.
And that would be, and back to the TED Talk, that would be a red flag, is if your therapist takes things personally.
And 100% a green flag is, and I just thought about it while you're talking. When we started doing the under the surface dive of what's going on with me and what deeper things I need to work on, there was something that I wanted to talk about, but I wasn't ready. And we were like listing things, and like I had listed what I wanted to talk about. And like I obviously didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to want to talk about it. So she saw that and was like, okay, well, what's something a little bit less that we could talk about this week? Let's a little less that we could work on. And then allowed me the time I needed to do what I needed to do to get up to the point where we were going to talk about it. Whereas if she had forced me or not stopped me, it could have been detrimental to my therapy. It could have been detrimental to my mental health.
Or guilted you and said, wow, I guess like if you can't do this, maybe we shouldn't continue.
Yeah. So like, and there's a huge difference. I had to talk to a psychologist, somebody who prescribes medication so I could be on medical marijuana.
Psychiatrist,
thank you. I had to talk to somebody about that. The person, not very warm, as I was saying earlier to Matt, like they're all weird. They're all just some form of weird. And asked,
opinions viewed in this
don't reflect upon anybody else. But she pushed on something that I had said and brought up a memory I wasn't ready to deal with that led to a flashback later. So for the first time ever, my husband got to find me curled up in my chair sobbing, and I couldn't talk and I couldn't move. Like he was in the same room and I could only communicate by texting to him because I just didn't have words. And that lasted 2-3 hours of him. Now, thankfully, my first therapist had a sheet that she wrote out what to do in case of flashback. And he followed it to a T. So that's something I would highly recommend. Maybe if you live in a house full of people.
Safety planning, yeah. Safety
planning is great because that could have gone horribly wrong in any way, shape, or form. I am very lucky. I have a caring, wonderful husband who is there for me. But if like he didn't have the instructions, he would have had no idea what to do. And then that would have led him to like feel anxiety and stuff like that. If he had tried to help me, that would have made it worse. So like we're talking about a huge spiral that could have made it worse. But does it suck that it happened? Yes, but I am so thankful I had a safety plan in place, and I'm never going to talk to that woman again. But yes, safety plans. Safety plans are huge. I didn't even realize that.
And having a safety plan is important because it it reminds me of working with trauma is that the role playing game, the One Child's Heart or One Child's, I don't know if you ever heard of it before.
It sounds familiar, but I don't know it.
The book is somewhere on my right hand side. One Child's Heart, and the idea is it's a role playing game working it is One Child's Heart, and it's a role playing game working on trauma with kids. And so like you play the role of like a therapist, counselor, psychologist, school official, religious official, whatever, and you're like going back into these kids' memories of traumatic times, and it purposely doesn't in the base gameplay go for sexual trauma, but more so for it's kind of like after the trauma has happened and you're trying to console this person, and you can't promise to change the future because you're going back in time, sort of thing. It's all a simulation, but anyways, why I'm getting at it is you always roll after whatever you say. because you could trigger somebody inadvertently, because that's just the way things work. You may have all the best intentions in the world, don't take it personally, but you all may have the best intentions in the world, and it's just something you say or something you do, or even showing somebody compassion can trigger somebody. And so that's why it's important just to kind of roll with it, have your safety plan if necessary, all those sorts of things. I mean, you don't even do trauma work before you talk about grounding and other such, because you want to have the tools available to you at the time.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a wonderful thing to talk about. And we're going to take a break. And you rest. No. Get up, walk around, get your water, and we'll be back.
Mhm.
And we're back.
Yay.
Yay. So I hope everybody is having a wonderful time. Hi, Jack, by the way. Jack is here.
Uh-oh. Oh, my boss, not boss, is watching.
Oh, okay. Your boss, not boss. Real quick, I'm going to point out. I wanna throw this out to everybody. If you like TTRPGs at all, which I know most of you do,
Are you referring to tabletop role-playing games or therapeutic tabletop role-playing
I'm
games?
talking about tabletop role-playing games for trans rights in Texas.
Oh, wow.
So itch.io is running a bundle right now, and I put the link in. What do you mean that's an error? It's not an error. That's the right one. Anyway, it's a bundle. It's got they already have over $175,000 raised. They have another month to go, 29 days to go, and they keep raising their goal, which is amazing. And this is what 17. I bought it. I paid $10 for it. The minimum to pay is $5. And it's 17 pages of different role-playing games and sources and just so much stuff, including Bo Yeager Sheldon, who is going to be on Table Boundaries this month.
Nice.
The book they wrote is in there. Several books they wrote are in there, and the one that I'm looking at right now is Selfie. Is 5 live action games by Bo Sheldon. So there's so many resources in there. Kissing Comrades says be gay and do crimes. I mean, what more could you possibly want? So it's wonderful. You should definitely take a look at it. Again, it's $5. It's for an amazing cause. And as it's like 17 page, like still scrolling, 17 pages of just TTRPG stuff, which is amazing because then you also reminds me of the vast amount of stuff people have made that we don't even know about.
So if you give at least $17, that's $1 per page, which is well worth it.
Yeah. It is definitely worth it.
So even more than $17 is even better.
Yes. All the money that you can. Not too much. Don't hurt yourself, but all the money you can donate is wonderful. So I wanted to talk about the very special moment that me and Matt had, which is our session 0, when we were doing the social anxiety TTRPG. And I love talking to people about this session 0 because I have been playing TTRPGs for over 25 years. Okay, so I've been doing this for a long ass time, and I have come into different iterations of it. Like eventually, like it was just dungeon crawls, and then we started to role play a bit, and then Critical Role came out, and now we role play a lot. And there's a lot of different things, and as we get older and grow, so do the things that we love sometimes. TTRPGs being one of them. Now, as somebody with a mental illness or several, the first session 0 I had with Matt was one of the first times that we had talked about triggers, which at the time, and it's surprising at the time, that was the first time I had that conversation with as many games as I had played. And I played a lot of games with friends who knew about my background, so they knew things weren't included, but this was a reminder that this is something that should be in all TTRPGs. So can you, so if you're doing a therapy TTRPG, can you tell people what that session 0 looks like to you?
Yeah, I mean, let's even step back to just TTRPG in general.
Sure.
If you're, I think a lot of, one of the things that kind of led me to adding more credence to this and making sure I do it is recognizing privilege, because if you're somebody who has a background and maybe you're either not addressing mental health issues, or you don't have complex mental health issues, or you don't have some mental health issues, white cis hetero male, you're probably not triggered that much about many things, and so you end up just kind of you look at the stereotypes for role playing, a lot more men than women, and a lot more, just not thinking about it. So I think it's really huge to just check yourself. But the other thing is that when you bring it in and you're playing with a table of people, what I found often is that through playing through the years, it's people will be triggered by things that are happening, whether you knew it or not, whether you knew their background or not, and whether things are happening. Sometimes things are just too much, and they don't have to be mental health related. They don't have to be lived experience. Some people just don't like things. And so if you're really coming at tabletop role playing as a collaborative experience, you want everyone to participate fully, and you want everybody to be there, present, want to play, get what they want out of the play, all that kind of stuff. So when you're being that collaborative, talking about triggers, talking about safety mechanisms is so huge, because I've been at tables where we don't talk about it, and then somebody does get triggered, and then it's like no one wants to play anymore from that point, or no one wants to follow that adventure, or nobody and then it becomes a really big kind of on the victim piece, or on the person suffering piece, because it's like, oh, I'm sorry I ruined everyone else's gameplay. Yeah. But in reality, if you were to ask the person ahead of time, do you need this aspect in the game? Most players would be like, I really don't care. And so talking about that as a background is huge, because then when we bring it into therapeutic TTRPG, therapeutic in general, whether you're actually applying therapy practice or just the therapeutic use, the socially beneficial use and skill-based use of TTRPG, you want to make sure everybody is happy, healthy, and safe at the table. Yeah. And especially if you're going to add in horror elements or more risque elements. Mm-hmm. When we chose social anxiety to work forward with, my love of horror came in. And so the idea is to make people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so, not going into it too much, but the idea is you can have socially awkward events happen to people, but you can also have just generally horror-themed basis stuff going on. So I remember at one point I was talking with the co-facilitator and was like, I'm going to kill this character, this NPC. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Is there a therapeutic value in this or not? I just want to kill them. Why? I don't know. I want to ramp up the tension. Okay. And so what do you think could happen at the table? What do you think could happen with this? Like, it's discussions like that where it's always great if you're going to run a therapy-driven TTRPG, it's to have a co-facilitator sort of thing. But, session 0 is so huge, because if you think about it, when you're doing the therapy background, you've done a little bit of an intake with the person. You've done the interview, you've got the mental health assessment going on, and then this is a chance to say, what does everyone want in their game? What do they not want in their game? What are they comfortable with? What are they not comfortable with? And it's never a guarantee that something won't come up, or that someone says they're okay with it, and then they're not actually okay with it. Like, it always goes back to, good storytelling as well. And I think a big portion of TTRPG, therapeutic TTRPG, therapy-driven TTRPG, mm-hmm. is being a good storyteller. Like, you have to be just as good of a GM as you are as a therapist. And I think that's a hard part, because you don't want to fall into old tropes of storytelling, like what Game of Thrones fell into, where they had sexual assault as a driving factor in a story because a woman's involved. It's that aspect of, when you're telling a story, you want to know what people want to experience, what they don't experience, what they want to touch upon. And so we did 2 pieces. We did the X card, mm-hmm. and then also we had a co-facilitator in the background checking on people. So, like, what's kind of nice about the 2-person model is if I'm noticing somebody is uncomfortable mm-hmm. or disengaged, I can send somebody in the background and say, can you check up with this person and just make sure they're okay and they're engaged and things are going well? So there's that aspect. Yeah. We offered individual therapy or just debrief stuff after session, even after session, if people wanted to, sort of thing. And then there was an aspect of veils and lines as well. So I'll explain a little bit. X card is basically, at any point you can, I don't remember how we specifically did it, but you could just put an X and we would rewind back a bit and then go around that topic. And then it, because that doesn't like call somebody out on the spot. It doesn't say, hey, this person wants this to stop. It was more like, we're not going to discuss it. We can discuss it later if people do want to, but we're going to go in a different direction.
I think we were supposed to send, like, we could either publicly put an X in our Zoom chat, or we could send you a private message with just an X, and then that was the notification. Okay, back up a bit and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, because if you're doing collaborative storytelling as a basis, and somebody says this is not for me, or I don't like this, or there's any reason not to continue, then you're not being collaborative if you don't go somewhere else. And really, anything you're doing is not absolutely necessary.
Yes.
The other piece too is as co-facilitators, never joking about X. No. So I do remember times when I'm running groups where people will joke about it and say, "Oh, Matt, you're causing me the X card," and it's shutting it down, because joking about it makes people feel maybe like they shouldn't use it, or it's
Mhm.
not as serious as it should be, sort of thing. Or they might even playfully use it, which is again a boundary you want to set. Like, we don't joke about this because it's a serious
Yeah.
thing, you know.
Yeah, and I do remember the co-facilitator sending me a message once or twice. You know, are you okay? You know, you look so great. And most of the time, it's just I'm tired.
Mhm.
But it was always nice to know that in the therapy setting, and it doesn't even have to be in a therapy setting. I mean, if you're having a regular session at your table and you see somebody's completely disinterested or maybe disassociating, like,
Mhm.
hey, you know, what's going on? Is everything okay? You take a break and talk to them about it. Just a nice check-in makes everybody at the table feel like they are important and cared
Mhm.
for, and that this is, and that reminds them, that instills that this is a safe space.
Yes.
So if somebody might not be able to be like, hey Matt, I can't do this. Like Jack said that, you know, he's gonna kill that cow, and I love cow. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. It's just literally the first thing that popped in my head. So like, I might not be able to do that. So Jack goes ahead and he murders the cow. And then you see that I'm upset, and I go, okay, well, you know, Jack killed the animal, and that upset me. That, you know, caused me some issue. And then that's something that now we can take forward, you know, and just, okay, we won't talk about it anymore. Moving forward, nobody's going to kill animals, you know? It happens, you know? So it's a wonderful thing.
To give an example of that, so say we'll go with the cow piece,
Okay,
right?
go with the cow.
So like, yeah, so in the story it's like, oh, you come across the remains of this cow that's been butchered and there's claw marks in it, and someone's like, no. Okay. And so, you know, it's like that private message of like, how would you like to proceed? Do you want just like, is there specifics, or should we just skip? Do you want to even talk about it? Okay. Because the idea is that you don't want to just blatantly not hear out the person, right? But you also don't want to draw attention to it. You don't want to whatever. So you can have that person in the background be like, if you want to talk about it now, you can. If not, then that's fine. We'll talk about it later if you like. And if not, then please just identify what part. Is it the maiming of an animal? Is it any animal death? Is it claw marks? Maybe you hate claw marks.
Yeah.
You know, it could be anything. And so it's really trying to find that nice natural balance, because if you can't achieve the story without this cow being maimed, I don't, you need to work on the GM part.
There's some other issues in there. Well, one of my triggers is animal abuse. And it's something we talked about. And but the thing is, like, when I say animal abuse, you have a vision of what animal abuse is in your mind.
Exactly, yes.
And I have a vision of what it is in my mind. So, you know, you don't think that this butchered cow is animal abuse in the way that, you know, I would think of it. So maybe it did trigger me. Maybe it did cause an issue. Being prepared for stuff like that. Or you can even, I mean, like, I think we pretty much clarified some things, but then as Thea pointed out, you don't know, sometimes you don't know what's going to trigger you until you know you get triggered, and that's fun.
I said I was okay with cows, but now I'm not, and that's fine. And I think that's a big piece of it, is it's fine to feel and it's fine to announce. Like, I would rather people just announce something than to sit, have it affect them, affect their gameplay, affect the therapy, if they're not doing therapy, affect anything else, and then they go home and they're worse off than they came. Like, that is more of a concern than any aspect of any story.
Yeah.
In any single way.
We, Drawlicon a couple years ago, I was on a mental health panel, and somebody in the audience asked, what happens if you do get triggered? During, like, what if somebody does something that triggers you? And there's okay, I accidentally got triggered. I am not gonna take that personally. That's me. I understand things, but, you know, I'm a different person. However, if you trigger me intentionally, then there is a series of events. Because when people think of triggers and stuff like that, they think it's like, oh, you're upset right now. No. Nay, good sir. Let me explain to you what's going to happen. Is that I realize that this table and this group is no longer a safe space for me. And I do not feel safe here. So I may end up resenting the game forever. I may just not come back. If I have any good friends at that table, well, they're going to leave. But if we talk about personally, I'm going to go home and like now my husband and my daughter are going to see that I'm upset. I'm going to be in a foul mood. I may not be able to explain to them why or want to explain to them why. And if we're not in a good communication, they're not going to realize why I'm acting the way I am. So maybe I have to cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week. Like, a trigger isn't simply like, you know, it's not a sneeze. It's not something that happens and goes away. This can affect you for weeks, you know, because it's something that, you know, it's deep, it hurts, and it's important to our mental health. So, yeah.
And safe spaces are forged. They're not just announced. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've come to realize over time is that you want to set up everything as perfect as you can, but just announcing something as a safe space, or one of my critiques about having safe zones at cons and such is you're announcing this is the safe zone, but really it's by practice that's more important. So what does that look like? How do the volunteers interact with people? You can't just say it's like it's like when people maybe you'll appreciate this or not, but like when they put a rainbow flag in their office and they're like done and done, you know, like it's you have to work towards being an ally. You can't just put the flag up. And so I think that's a huge important part of a safe space is that you try your best to set up these pieces, but they're forged. They're forged through the interactions, through how you handle these situations. And sometimes people will be triggered and there's nothing you can do about it, and not taking it personally and going, okay, what can we do next time when things have de-escalated a bit?
Yeah.
The other thing that we did other than X's than the X card was we did lines and veils to start. So lines and veils was, what is a line that you don't want crossed in your TTRPG, and what are veils? Things that you can have but behind the curtain. So a good example is if someone dies. So a line might be like, I don't want anyone to die in the adventure. Well, that's a challenge, all right, for a horror one, but sure. But the other piece for veils is I don't want to see someone's dead body, or I don't want to see them die. So then characters might come across a corpse, or they might come across somebody who's recently died instead of actually seeing the murder. Yeah. So again, it's that idea of you set out the best you can for session 0. What's nice about therapy applied to TTRPG is you do the mental health assessment first, so you can individually speak with people about their different triggers and their different backgrounds and such, and then you can use that in your safety planning and in your first session stuff as well for individual and then as a group.
Yeah,
because maybe there's something that you said to me privately, but not you in particular, Margot, but I mean in particular somebody said to me in their introduction or in their assessment that they don't want shared with the group, and they don't feel like they can announce it during the X's and during the lines and veils, right? So there's things like that where you're going that extra step. Yeah, it's planned for things that might not happen, but at least it brings people together, I think, too. So
yeah, and again, I so in this particular instance in the game that I was in with you, I decided to play myself as a teenager because I've been in therapy for a while. I've been in some TTRPGs. I'm gonna break all the barriers and I'm just gonna be me. And I came to the table with the terrible parents and the weird background and all of that stuff. And because that was such a safe space, I was able to really, as I said, I walked out with confidence. And I walked out with, realizing that I think it's more of like the negative thoughts that you think that negative thoughts that strangers are having, like, because I was in a group of strangers. That's how that worked. And it really, for me, playing myself helped a lot. But it helped. I was able to play myself. I was able to push that boundary for myself because I had that session 0. And I knew that Matt took everything that I said very seriously. I'm a big for no child abuse. No, I don't even want to hear about it. Children are never allowed to be abused. And if somebody even thinks about it, they just burst into just flames. Knowing that boundaries there really creates the way for you to just just, play, to just be you, to do what you want to do. And I know Jack has brought up, like, they've had sessions where, we've had sessions where, well, he's had sessions where, like, racism was off the table. It's not a thing in this fantasy world. In Lost, me and Vaughn played a married couple, 2 women married. Homophobia was something that never came up. And that's okay. We don't have to, it's a fantasy world. We don't have to deal with day-to-day issues in our fantasy world,
Yeah, and I think, what's interesting too about all this is, so for me, the X card and those session 0 things are so important if I'm going to add horror or any sort of creepy elements to my gameplay, because what I'm hoping to do is, dread and doubt and horror and terror, you're adding in anxiety responses plus disgust plus other things, and you want to kind of, when using that type of, I was going to say utilize again, when using those elements to elicit certain responses for, say, social anxiety, you want to push the envelope to the point where someone will have a reaction, but not too much that they lose the point of the reaction or they lose their ability to react or do things in particular. And I think, again, one of the things I'm studying more and more is the use of horror and the horror genre in therapy, because, if you're gonna be, if you're gonna suffer in life, I mean, the wheel, the wheel of suffering, samsara. Like, if you're gonna suffer in life, why not put it into therapy rather than into your daily life, sort of thing. But it's, I think horror is such a good avenue where you can purposely scare yourself a bit with things that you probably know won't happen.
Yeah. So wait,
to somebody else.
Sidestep, just a tiny one. Why do we love horror? Why do we, with anxiety and trauma, why?
I don't think there's a huge correlation. This, again, my personal opinions. I don't think that there's a huge correlation between those who have anxiety and trauma that like horror. I have met 100 billion more people that do not like horror because of trauma and anxiety, because they're already stressed enough. But again, I think it's always looking at, like, what are we hoping to get from these pieces? What about that genre, or what about that story really, like, strikes you? Like, why do I want to watch a guy with a chainsaw hunt people down and, like, cook them up? Like, what am I getting from this?
Burgers.
Yeah.
I have heard that the one thing that I have heard is that it's a controlled environment where we can feel anxious, but know that nothing is going to hurt us. I think that's the only thing that I've ever heard that may explain it.
Yeah, and I think it's personal too. It's per person. Like, for me, I enjoy Scream more than I enjoy, say, Halloween. I like the stalking bit because it's always creepy. Because, like, I think it's something you can relate to as a person, like walking at night and being like, "There's someone looking at me." But I like Scream because almost every person who fights the killer a bit. There's always a struggle. They always, like, kick things over, and it's always like, who's gonna win, who's gonna not. Maybe that goes back to Dead by Daylight. I'm running the circles, but I'm doing the loops. I think I'm doing the loops. But I think it's just like, jump scares can be so nice too when it comes down to, like, eliciting that anxiety response in a controlled way, because I find sometimes it's a lot more fun playing a game with jump scare, like Alien Isolation, for example.
Oh God!
Right?
I couldn't play it.
You can't fight back. I don't like that. I have a big thing about wanting to fight back against things.
Yep.
But I'm sure if I played it, and it's such a good allegory for anxiety and CBT, because when you first play the game, you can't fight back, you have to hide, you have no power, everything's unpredictable, ambiguous, and, like, it's novel, and you don't know what to do, and you're going to die a lot from jump scares. But the more you play it, the better you get at it, and then the anxiety starts to go down because it becomes more predictable.
Yeah.
It becomes less novel, and it becomes less ambiguous about what you're supposed to do. And then you use your tools, you get better at the skills. And I'm sure by the end of the game, if you play it for 40 hours or 200 hours or whatever, you're actually start to get bored, which is, boredom is the absence of anxiety and the absence of activation. If you're bored in something, you're like, oh, I'm so not activated.
Thea says Scream is my favorite. I love that Ghostface is a real person. They bumble, they have humor, They could be anyone. They have a beatable killer. Also, Sydney is my favorite final girl. We, the viewers, go through so much and grow with her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually got that with Five Nights at Freddy's. At first, like, the jump scares got me every time.
Absolutely.
And then, like, at the end of the second one, it was just like, son of a bitch, I have to start again.
Yes.
But, like, I can't play games like Outlast and Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation, I think I lasted an hour. The atmosphere in that game is so good. Yeah. Like, the creaks and the noises, and then just the thrum of nothing was just I was like, nope, I can't do it. Like, I was having an anxiety attack listening to nothing. Yeah. And I was like, can't do it. I played 10 minutes of Outlast. First jump scare.
Maybe it's the powerlessness aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't
Some people don't like powerlessness.
I don't like anything where I can't fight back. When my fight or flight goes off, I'm going to fight. Somebody's going to get hit. And if I can't hit somebody, I'm like, then what is the purpose of me doing anything?
Yeah.
But, anyway, jump back to the table. Now that we've talked about horror. One of the things that I am very thankful for is that Vel, my husband, whom most of you know, took the training to be a DM under the Bodhana model. And because of that, I have always, in TTRPGs, I've always had issues with parents. My character's parents specifically. Like, they're dead, or I'm adopted, or something. It's one of those two things. In the current one, I don't have parents. Like, I was a creation. Like, it's always something like that. When I realized that, I brought it up to my husband. I was like, so I kind of want to work on this thing. And he had a plan. He was like, okay, well, this is what we would do. And I'm like, all right, well, will you do it? And he goes, yeah, I'll do it on the next one. I was like, what do I have to do? And he was like, nothing. It's my responsibility. And I'm really excited for that, because this is something that I can work on without, like, having to, I'm going to be responding to it, if that makes sense. He's going to be doing the running of the game and everything, and he's going to be, playing as my parents, and I'm going to have to respond to it instead of me coming up with a vicious backstory about how they were murdered and I have to avenge them, or how they sold me, or whatever. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the chance to explore that in a safe space, and then hopefully level up my role-playing skills, because I'm feeling a bit stunted. Where are your parents? I killed them. It's fine. It's whatever.
I think you bring up a good point, though, about mixing in therapy and not therapy, though. Right? Like, I think we can achieve a lot of things without necessarily labeling it therapy, but still using the same sort of boundary piece. Yeah. So, when I think about the fact that your husband's going to run a game where you are going to be moving through your trauma with parents, set some good boundaries.
Yeah.
because and it doesn't have to be therapy, because I think what ends up happening is, I mean, the movie that comes to my mind is Antichrist. I don't know if you ever watched that. A therapist takes his wife into the woods to do therapy with her one-to-one, as a therapist, and for his wife, and it ends horrifically. But it's an interesting movie. Yeah. But I think it's that idea of not wanting to mix your boundaries too much, right? Like, exploring ideas through TTRPG, perfectly great. One of the things I did a while ago was I played a character female character who was abused very young and used. So the abuse was a lot of, like, treating her like an object. And so when she interacts, so I made sure when I was interacting with other characters that I was always asking about being used. Would you like to use my powers? Would you like to use my thing? I'm always used. And so I saw myself as more as an object than anything else for use of others. That's where it ended, though. It was very much like, I want to explore this aspect. I don't want to come off as insensitive or stereotypical, or, I mean, I have I think it's Genshi, that new role-playing game about you fight vampires at night, but you run a restaurant during the day.
Yeah.
And
Jack
in the
was talking
instruction
about-
manual, it's like, don't use an Asian accent. Just play the damn game. And it's, and so I think that's huge because it's, again, you can explore parts of yourself with TTRPG without therapy, but just keep checking in because you never want to mix weird boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? It's your husband running it.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe there's a stepping of over lines or something else, and then there's a complex relationship with that, and then here's your biggest support, causing pain for you,
Mm-hmm.
and so I mean that's the only thing that kind of comes to my mind. Again, boundaries,
Yeah.
and talking.
No, I'm excited. He is his whole goal. He's going to play loving, doting parents.
Mm-hmm. Again, agreed upon ahead of time. Which is,
And that's
right?
and that's what I'm going to have to respond to. I'm going to have to respond to what it is to have loving, doting parents. And I'm like, I may cry at some point, but I'm ready to do this. And I think that is a fun. That's a fun thing for me. Not everybody's going to want to explore during their TTRPG session, and that's fine.
Sometimes I just want to be a barbarian orc that just cleaves things.
Yeah, sometimes I had a barbarian Aasimar that had a 25 strength. Oh, she couldn't be killed.
There you go.
It was beautiful. I loved playing her. I played her for Charities and Champions one year. I was busy running the event, so Troy made her, and he was like, by the way, she can't be killed. I was like, I'm sorry, what? He was like, you are always raging. And you cannot be knocked out of rage. And I was like, this is the best character ever. But I've also had fun exploring different personalities. One year for same charity. One year I played a very like upbeat, happy to be here, like let's go paladin, which is completely the opposite of how I typically am. Being this slight edgelord that I am in all of my characters. Depressed, all in black. Every character I play is basically me at this point now. And so now I'm branching out, and in the Tanker's Tales and Treasure, which unfortunately is not happening today. I just saw because Troy had a root canal yesterday, and he's in a lot of pain. I'm playing a person who wants to be the greatest hero in the world. I'm leaning into like that My Hero Academia real hard, and it's a mix between like Deku and All Might.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Oh my god, it's so hard. Because she wants to save everybody and help people, and people deserve to be like saved and everything, which goes against the other part of my. It's like fuck everybody, I don't care.
Yep.
So, thank you, Thea. So yeah, it's hard, but I am enjoying playing something a little bit different than myself.
That's at the root of escapism sometimes too, is either escaping yourself for a bit to be somebody else, or seeking out what other people do for problem solving or other tasks, or just playing out something that you like from TV. Like, absolutely, like, being All Might would be hilarious. Constantly smiling, flexing, running into burning buildings. Like, sometimes you just want to play it out. I mean, yeah.
I'm truly enjoying it. It's again, it's hard because I have to think and process as somebody different. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to do, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my god. This is exhausting. It is. It's exhausting. Yeah. I'm like, how do I be happy and smile all the time? I don't know, but we're working on it. We're doing it. Mm-hmm. And her name is Talia, and she has no parents.
There you go. There's still some things that are similar. Different.
There is some things that are similar. No, she is a blessing from the heavens. She is an Aasimar, so she was created for the power of the people. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think that much into it. I was just like, I was watching My Hero Academia for the fourth time. I was like, I'm gonna make All Might. Like, we're gonna be the greatest hero.
Yeah.
So, it's fun. It's fun to do. I like it. I like TTRPGs. There's
Yep,
there's a lot.
just like anything, just distinguish if you're doing it as therapeutic or you're doing it as therapy added or just doing it. And I think that's important because I don't want to turn anybody, like reflecting on what we talked about today, I don't want to turn anybody off of adding therapeutic value to TTRPGs or seeking out a therapist or anything else like that. What I really want to emphasize is, for people practicing, it's like, be proud of what you do what you do, offer what you do. You'll learn through time that you're off where you offer things, where you don't is dependent on the background, education, and then also your agency, right? Like some people, like I'll work at an employee assistance program and I get to do 4 sessions and I'm not supposed to do treatment, so I'm like a massage therapist who can only do butterfly kisses and relaxing massage. I can't do deep tissue stuff. So that's just where I am and what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important because there is a place in adding therapeutic value to TTRPGs, or just to seeing people other than therapists. Sometimes you might need a break and you want to work with somebody who is more peer support. Yeah. Somebody who has lived experience, who will you can just talk with about what's going on and not get that clinically therapeutic driven bop. Instead, you're meeting with somebody who's like, yeah, I struggled through that too, or yeah, I've had these issues as well, sort of thing. So I think there's so many different things out there, and it's really hard sometimes to really figure out what would be best for me right now. But if you do get a chance to do that, then just kind of seeking out, what is the goal? Is the goal to address that issue head on right now and maybe seek therapy? And if you have all the resources in the world, go with a psychologist who their bread and butter, 25 years worth of like, I only treat this issue. Do you have it? Great. You will pay lots of money, but it'll be done sooner, versus maybe I just want to interact with people and other people who have similar issues like my bipolar piece, who are in recovery. Maybe I just want to talk to other people recovering, you can seek out a bunch of different stuff, but really I think when we end up in problems is when people offer too much. Like Gordon Ramsay's restaurant rescue stuff is great because it's like he'll look at a menu and be like, why do you offer everything all the time? Just offer 1 or 2 pages, because that's one other red flag for me is if you ask somebody, what are you comfortable practicing, what modalities, and what are you comfortable treating? And if they're like a little bit of everything all the time, then I question, okay, so what, like, why is it everything? Well, and if you define things as everything, that's also an issue.
It's like a general handyman that you're hiring to replace all the pipes in your house. Like, they know a little bit about it, but like, how good is that job going to be at the end of the day? You want a professional plumber to come replace all the pipes in your house.
Well, and it depends on how bad it is, right? Like some people do benefit from generalists, but other people, if the issue is more complex and like trauma and like PTSD like and stuff, then maybe you should seek out that very specific part.
Yeah, and it is something that everybody, if you're interested in therapy, if you want to do therapy, I highly recommend that you try and don't give up easily. And I'll say the same thing about medication. I get a lot of people who are like, well, I don't really want to take medication. I didn't either. And now I have I have a maraca every day of all the meds I have to take. I took the majority of them already, so. But did the first of everything I tried work? No. And you have to go through dosage changes, and maybe this medicine isn't great for you, but would you get insulin for diabetes? Yeah, but I don't have diabetes. That's you, Jack. That's you.
Hey, and let's also not jump on the train that everyone needs meds.
No, God,
Some people do well with meds.
Yeah.
Some people do. Some people don't need them. If you go through the intensive treatment and you can sit through it and you can practice it, you may not need it.
Oh yeah.
There are some things that just meds are the staple for. Schizophrenia. Sometimes with this personal opinion, but bipolar, I would say, is something that definitely benefits from meds. And sometimes with things like that, it's like, I can't do the therapy unless you're at a stabilized point with meds, and it's that kind of aspect where, you can do different therapies with psychosis, blah, blah, blah. But it's that kind of idea of Unfortunately, unlike a broken leg, it's going to be very tailored to what you do. And if you were to ever go see a massage therapist and and sit and through an hour and a half of someone massaging you the wrong way and not speak up about it and just continue to go all the time, you're not going to be happy with the process, you know?
You're
And that's
just
why
throwing your money out.
they're just hammering in, making you bleed or whatever, and you're like, oh, it's okay, you're a professional. I think you know what you're doing. You know, like you can have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
No therapist should be, no practitioner of anything should be shy about talking about the process of what they do and what their limitations are and what's going on. And if they are, that's fine. It's something to work on. I've had to work on it. A lot of people have to work on it. It's just basically coming to terms with that you're a human being, trying to provide some sort of trying to knowledge transfer and skill transfer and work collaboratively. And there are going to be issues throughout because you're a human being.
Yeah. I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're all humans. Nobody's perfect. There's no such thing.
Except for the lizard folk, but yes.
Lizard folk are far from perfect. They're gross.
Yes. Most of us are humans.
We actually, in one of our games, we taught a lizard folk to say orgy. That's all he could say.
Okay. That's a red flag for therapy. No.
That is a red flag for therapy.
That is a red flag for therapy.
Matt, we do not trust nor speak of the lizard folk.
As humans, we do well as humans and not computers. And we are all definitely 100% humans.
Mm-hmm,
Please do this recaptura to tell me where you see the car. Just for fun.
I saw the commercial. Is this an S or a 5? And it's a dude sitting at the computer trying to put it. It's a robot putting. Oh my god, that's how I feel every time. What fun things are you doing, Matt?
Oof, that's a good question. Probably playing Dead by Daylight. Leading people to my Twitch stream that is not running. We will run it soon. I will find time. I will make time for us to meet, and you can help me out. Yeah, probably running Dead by Daylight. I might even be playing some Dungeons and Dragons tonight, 5th edition. Depends. I am a what's the one with the horns again? The not minotaurs, but they look like devils. Yeah, tieflings.
Tieflings.
I'm a tiefling warlock who negotiates through bolts. So I'm always like, let's negotiate. And so yeah, so there's that piece. That's what I'll probably be doing tonight, and just relaxing a bit. And yeah.
Fun. I am going to be doing movie nights since I'm not playing any TTRPGs. So probably some horror movies. Yay! Because that's all I want to watch right now.
But what horror movie are you going to watch?
I don't know. I'm caught up on The Conjuring.
I just rewatched all of The Conjuring.
I just watched the third one. The Devil Made Me Do It. We just watched that on Tuesday, maybe. I haven't watched The Nun, and I haven't watched all of the Annabelle movies.
The Nun you can skip.
Well, I can't watch The Nun because 2 of the people that are in chat are terrified of that movie, so I can't watch it with them.
I just watched an interesting one on Shudder called Hellbenders, I think. It's a mother and daughter who live in the woods, and they can't interact with civilization. And it's very interesting because they try to live a life very much off the grid, and no one's allowed to come on their land, and only the mother can go into town. And it was a very interesting story to watch.
Interesting. Oh, I recently bought this. It's a movie logbook, Addicted to Horror.
Nice.
And you literally you write down the date, the movie title,
Nice.
Director, year, subgenre. Your rating is in knives. And your likes and your dislikes, and I love it, and I can't wait to fill it with movies.
Nice.
Especially when I'm like, ooh, I want to watch this movie, and then Netflix is like, hey, you already watched this movie, and I'm like, well, it must have been terrible because I don't remember anything. I don't remember crap. But yeah, so I will be watching movies tonight. There is no Malhaven tomorrow night. I'm going to be at a birthday party. And so you can come back to my stream on my personal channel on Wednesday. And then next Saturday here, we have the Bodhana cast with Jack and James. And whatever weirdness they're going to be doing. But if you like what we do, or if you want to help us out, remember, we are a charity, we are a non-profit, and we need money to help people. So you can sub to us, you can donate, you can go to our merch store on the bodhanagroup.org /shop and buy amazing merchandise. Or if you're a GM and you want to learn all the wonderful things about helping people, we have a class for that. You can contact Jack directly, though.
Yes, we have a class. Please see Jack for more details.
Please see Jack for more details. You can learn how to be an amazing DM, create a safe space at your table, and, be more, I guess. I don't know. Mental health first aid. That's what it is. Mental health. Up your
GM game.
Oh yeah, up your GM game. How does
over
that
9,000.
How does that make you feel? I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. The kobolds to burn down the village. How does that make you feel? So, but thank you all so much. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Drink your water. Go out into the sunlight at some point, and we'll see you next time.
Can I just add one thing as well? I know you're in the middle of the wave.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns or anything, feel free to message me through Bodhana.
Yeah. But he's not your therapist, so.
No. But if you have questions, concerns, or anything else, I'm always happy to talk.
There you go. All right. Bye.